Chapter 16. Little Four wants to earn money. Little Four rolled around the floor once sheepishly, before rolling over to Ling Lan's side. "It's okay. After fighting with you, I feel much better. I was really very unhappy before." "How so?" "When we were in the hover car earlier and Ling-07 spoke, I had thought that this world had someone like me. I was so happy. Since leaving Mandora, I have never met another of my kind. I was so lonely. But, after secretly talking to Ling-07, I found that Ling-07 is not the kin I'm looking for. Although he is very similar, but it's just different. Not the same. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Little Four asked, somewhat incoherently, his face full of hope. He couldn't be blamed for his confusion. His mental intelligence was at the level of a 5 to 6-year-old child at the moment. Ling Lan replied jokingly, "Just like a human and a monkey?" Little Four's eyes brightened and he nodded vigorously, saying, "Yeah, just like that." Ling Lan patted Little Four's head affectionately. "Little Four, you forget, I am also a solitary existence in this world. Since you are also alone, and I am also alone, let us continue walking forward as companions." Little Four was puzzled. "You are my host. Of course I will continue to be bound to you in contract and never leave." Ling Lan pulled Little Four into an embrace, saying softly, "That's not what I'm saying. I mean like family, like siblings, like the best of friends. Let's entrust our backs to each other, and become each other's most trusted person." Ling Lan was willing to put her faith in Little Four, for Little Four was the one who had accompanied her through the end of her last life, and he was also the one who had given her this new life. All these experiences had made Ling Lan accept Little Four, viewing him as a younger brother. Ling Lan was determined to compensate for the regrets of the past life with her new life, and so she wanted a healthy body, freedom and space, and also a friend she could talk to about anything. A younger brother who trusted her, who she could also trust in return. Laying in Ling Lan's arms, Little Four was a little lost. He could not understand. His core dictated that he must be loyal to his host. So why did Ling Lan say they should become each other's most trustworthy person? Did they not already have that sort of relationship? This was the first time Little Four was thinking with his full processing power. Even if his core chip became overheated, even if his processes started to slow, he still wanted the answer to this question. Because of this, he knew what it was to want for the first time. He did not want to see Ling Lan disappointed. Even though he knew this was against regulations, he wanted to be selfish just this once. It was now 2 months after the fight, and during this time, Little Four had managed to infiltrate this world's internet through the Bed's-equipped network. Under Little Four's clarifications, Ling Lan had learned that the virtual net here was already very developed, fully able to stand as a secondary world on its own. Ling Lan highly suspected that her mum was able to confine herself at home, most likely because of the existence of this virtual network, allowing her to do whatever she wanted to without needing to step foot out of her home. Moreover, she wouldn't have to worry about her identity, and could choose to live freely. From the information he gleaned on the internet, Little Four had discovered the true value of the gene-stimulating agents, and had also found out the typical absorption rate of the infants here. After Ling Lan was informed, she thought back to her first session with Fear. They had overdid it with the absorption of the agent that time after all. Fortunately, throughout history, there were still a few babies who had absorbed even more agent than her, so at least she wasn't breaking any records. The two of them conferred, coming to a decision that no matter how many tubes of agent the military brought next month, they would only absorb 10. Actually, Ling Lan didn't even want to absorb 10 tubes. She only wanted to absorb about 6 or 7 tubes, an amount which would match up with her original assessment results. However, Little Four was firmly against it, because from the information he had gathered, as they grew, the number of tubes an average baby absorbed would only increase rather than decrease after their first time. Only after they had matured would the number gradually fall and taper off, ending when they could finally no longer absorb any. Since Ling Lan had already absorbed 10 tubes her first time, it would make no sense for the number to decrease the second time. Rather than risk looking even more abnormal, She might as well continue absorbing 10 tubes. After all, that number had already been established the first time, so it wouldn't be any more surprising to the military. Furthermore, Ling Lan's body really needed that agent. Little Four had found that ever since Ling Lan started training in physical skills, her spiritual power had started growing at an even more rapid pace. Little Four was worried that Ling Lan's body growth would not be able to keep up with the growth of her spiritual power. After some internal debate, Ling Lan decided to accept Little Four's suggestion. Meanwhile, to better support Ling Lan, Little Four was struggling over how to earn money on the internet. This was because he had discovered suppliers for the agent on the net, and although the impurities in those agents were much higher than the ones provided by the military, that was not a problem for Little Four, who could clear away those impurities as easily as he could eat a carrot. Well, he couldn't really eat human food, so. Alright, let's just assume it's a virtual carrot. The point is, it was very easy for him. For this grand ambition, Little Four had even secretly created a bank account by hacking into the system of the center of the Federation Banking Alliance. Naturally, bypassing the defenses of the system was like child's play to him, as easy as eating a virtual carrot. To ensure the security of the account, without any approval, he had set the account's level to SSS. It wasn't that he didn't want to set it higher, but only one 5S account existed at the moment, which was the account of the Prime Minister of the Federation, so Little Four knew he couldn't go that far. Ling Lan observed as Little Four did all this and finally understood how amazing Little Four actually was. In the virtual world, Little Four was a god. However, no matter how amazing Little Four was, he still had no clue how to go about earning money, and so could only turn to Ling Lan for advice. Unfortunately, Ling Lan was also clueless about this. Think about it. Her previous life was pretty much spent on a sickbed. Other than learning about the world and getting information from the internet, she had basically spent the rest of her time reading novels and comics. If she had known this day would come, she would have spent that time learning how to do business and looking up financial information instead. Thump thump thump. Ling Lan was startled by the sudden sounds beside her. Lifting her head, she was stunned by the pile of books that had appeared in the Great Hall of the Mind Space. Ling Lan picked up a random book from the pile. The cover read. Looking at the titles of the other books in the pile, Ling Lan's face turned black. Little Four looked at her with a face begging for praise, so proud of himself as if he had done a great thing. Ling Lan said through gritted teeth, "Why did you bring out so many financial books? And where did you get these?" Little Four said smugly, "Weren't you thinking about how you wanted to read more about these things? Luckily, while you were in your previous body, I had downloaded and stored all the books I could get from the internet there. No matter what you want, I have it." Ling Lan blew up. "You think if I finish reading these I can become a business expert overnight? I think you're dreaming. What good can books do?" Little Four drooped. "Are they useless?" "Of course they are. It's all theory. It's not that easy in the real world. The most these books can do is just provide some entertainment," said Ling Lan, resigned. She knew very well that she had no talent in this area. Little Four was very disappointed. With low spirits, he said, "So they are only for human entertainment. Looks like I've wasted my time to get all these books. I have spent so much time." Seeing this, Ling Lan felt sorry for Little Four, and quickly reassured him, No, there could still be some precious books in your collection, and some people who want these books may never be able to get them anymore." A flash of inspiration rushed through Ling Lan's mind, but remained just out of her grasp. Little Four sighed. "In your previous world, all these books were freely available on the internet. Who wouldn't be able to get them?" "Stop trying to make me feel better." "My previous world, 10,000 years ago." Ling Lan finally caught hold of that spark. Excitedly, she said, "Little Four, I have figured out how we can earn money." Chapter 17, Redemption of Honor Points. Little Four asked excitedly, "What is it?" Ling Lan laughed and said, "After these 10,000 years, even if there are cloud drives and other sorts of storage methods, I don't think all books would have been preserved till now. Why don't you go look and see if there are any requests for old books on the internet?" Little Four was a little hesitant. Even if there were such requests, there wouldn't be many, which would only result in chump change. For his purpose of buying Linglan more gene-stimulating agent, he would need a lot more money, the more the better, so this little amount would not even be a drop in the ocean. Exasperated, Linglan flicked Little Four's forehead, saying, "Don't look down on this little bit of money. We just need to get started and collect some seed money first before looking for other ways to earn money. Otherwise, even if an opportunity appears, we won't be able to do anything." With this, Little Four understood, and abruptly felt the weight on his shoulders grow exponentially. He stood up tall and thumped his chest, saying, "You can count on me." Looking at his seriously adorable "believe in me you will not regret it" face, Linglan couldn't help but snicker in her heart. She found herself thankful once again that she had Little Four at her side, who was willing to work hard for her benefit. After some discussion, the two of them decided that Little Four would be fully responsible for all matters on the virtual network. That said, safety was the top priority. They'd rather take things slow and gradually accumulate their seed money, as long as they could keep things as covert as possible. Honestly, they really didn't need to rush. Even if they could buy the gene-stimulating agents right now, who would be able to use them? Little Four was a virtual being, while Linglan was still a baby who could not even crawl properly yet. After passing on the follow-up tasks to Little Four, Linglan happily went to bed without giving any further thought to the matter. Left alone, a fired-up Little Four rushed into the virtual world and started doing as Linglan said, slowly accumulating cash. Linglan was someone capable of putting her full trust in others, so she did not pay any further attention to the matter after entrusting Little Four with it, not even asking for a progress report. Little Four was touched by this show of trust. Oh, how much faith did his lord have in him, so he decided he must do his best to serve her until his death. A while back, Little Four had consumed several 100,000 words of the entire romance of the Three Kingdoms when fulfilling the request of a client. After that, he had become obsessed, and this was reflected in his method of addressing Linglan. Instead of the original host, he now called her lord. Every time Linglan heard that form of address, her head would throb. Why did this silly child love Ghostplay so much? It had to be said that Little Four was really very innocent. He had no idea that Linglan's show of trust was actually just blithe unconcern. In Linglan's opinion, while it would be great if they could earn money, it was also fine even if they didn't manage to earn any. After all, Little Four was the one who was gung-ho about it, and it was a zero-cost business. So it really didn't matter whether the results were good or bad. She was just glad to see Little Four in high spirits, no longer looking as lonely as he was before. Alright, to be honest, Linglan had assigned this task to Little Four as a way to distract him and cheer him up, and poor Little Four had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. Time passed by quickly, and Linglan finally became a toddler capable of moving about on 2 feet. During this time, she had received one more round of agent injections, and as discussed, they stopped absorbing at the 10th tube like before. As for the military people, it was the same group as before, and they seemed to have come mentally prepared this time, remaining calm throughout the whole procedure. In fact, they were even gaining the mistaken impression that absorbing 10 tubes was a completely natural phenomenon, not deserving of any surprise whatsoever. It had to be said that the military was certainly made up of extraordinarily mentally resilient and adaptable people. One day, during Linglan's 16th month of life, she was practicing her bendy poses as usual, diligently going through all 9 stances one at a time. She had actually managed to learn all 9 stances by the time she was just a little over 15 months old, and since then, she had made sure to practice all 9 stances in order every day. Of course, there were still inconsistencies and mistakes, but Linglan would correct them as she progressed, gradually converting the 9 stances into basic instinct. This time, when Linglan completed the 9th stance, she suddenly felt a surge of heat run through her body. It was so comfortable that she couldn't help but moan in pleasure. This was something that had never happened before, although she would also feel slightly warm and her body would be loose and comfortable after finishing the 9 stances. She had never felt this sort of euphoric floaty feeling before. Linglan laid comfortably on her bed, still basking in the echoes of contentment, when she abruptly found that her consciousness had been drawn into the learning mind space. Before this, she had always chosen to enter actively. This passive access was new. Before Ling Lan could protest the learning space's high-handedness, an aloof man had appeared out of thin air right in front of her. Ling Lan jerked in surprise, but immediately straightened up to say, "Hello, Instructor Number 1." She definitely must not let this formidable man notice her annoyance. Ling Lan intuitively knew that if she angered him, she would lose a layer of skin even if she didn't die. "Firstly, congratulations on your perfect completion of the Foundation chapter of the Advanced Physical Skills course," said Number 1, his face as emotionless and tone as cold as ever. Despite that, for some reason, Ling Lan just felt that Instructor Number 1 was actually in a very good mood. "Now you shall receive your reward," continued Number 1. Ling Lan felt excitement stir within her. What kind of reward would Instructor Number 1 give? At this moment, an extremely mechanical voice piped up beside Ling Lan's ear. "Reward, first item, time remaining from deadline, 49 days, awards 49 honor points. Second item, assessment results, perfect, awards 100 honor points. Total of all items, 149 honor points. Please confirm receipt." Facing Number 1 this time, Ling Lan finally realized that the mechanical voice she had heard before had not come from Number 1, but seemed to be the voice of the learning spaces system. Ling Lan chuckled dryly. Hindsight is truly 20/20. She only noticed now that although Number 1's voice was very cold, it was also crisp and clear, with none of the mechanical inflections of the system's voice. It was a shame that Instructor Number 1 had appeared behind her that first time, causing her to mistakenly attribute the mechanical voice to him. Instructor Number 1's voice rang out once more. "Now I shall explain the usage of honor points. Other than the core compulsory courses, the learning space also provides many additional supplementary courses which require honor points to unlock, and of course there are also games and other types of entertainment available. You may freely choose how you would like to use these honor points." "Use? Does this mean that honor points are not that easy to get?" asked Ling Lan calmly. She knew very well that Number 1's words may have some hidden meaning. It could even be another test, so she couldn't just take things at face value. Unfortunately, her questioning was not fruitful this time round. Number 1 did not answer, merely keeping his silence, though Ling Lan could sense a very light trace of humor in his eyes. Perhaps she had guessed correctly that honor points were indeed very precious, or perhaps this first seemingly generous award of honor points was another trap, trying to fool people into thinking honor points were easy to get so they would spend them thoughtlessly. A large screen suddenly appeared in front of Ling Lan. On the screen, there were many general category selections. It looked like these were the things that she could redeem with her honor points. "Do I really have to choose right now?" Ling Lan asked doggedly. Since she already knew that honor points were important, she didn't want to use them recklessly. Number 1 said, "You must. This is also one of your lessons." Number 1 smashed her hopeful plans, and continued, "You must choose within 10 minutes. Or else the system will enforce a random draw." At these words, Ling Lan's heart thumped. Something niggled at her mind, so without wasting any more time, she opened the redemption window. Chapter 18, Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Ling Lan flicked through the options on the screen. There really were all sorts of courses, from harp playing to chess and various art and literature courses. Even embroidery was included. Of course, there were also all sorts of martial combat skills, and even some really strange and bizarre courses she had never heard of before. The points to redeem these courses ranged from 1 point to several hundreds of points, while some even required up to 1 or 2,000 points and perhaps even more. The gaming and leisure options were noticeably more expensive, starting from a base redemption amount of 50 points. With the more expensive options reaching up to 5,000 points to 10,000 points. Of course, this section also had a smorgasbord of options. Take games for example, there were traditional games with retro designs, magic and sorcery games, futuristic apocalyptic games, galactic mecha games, martial combat games, and they actually even had dating simulation games. As for the other leisure options, anything you could think of as recreation could be found there. When she had tapped into that category, Ling Lan hadn't even known where to look. There were just too many options. Hell, was this still a learning space meant for the cultivation of young talent? Why did she feel a corrupting influence emanating from these options? Ling Lan decisively exited from the recreational categories, and opened up the learning courses. Time was counting down, so she did not have a moment to lose. Since she had to redeem something, she might as well use the honor points she had now to redeem something she needed most at present. With a rough idea of what she wanted, Ling Lan clicked open the combat category, and then chose the subcategory of defense. Countless defensive combat techniques and skills immediately popped up on the screen. Ling Lan selected the option to list the skills and techniques according to honor point requirement in ascending order, from the lowest to the highest. The first skill she saw cost only 1 honor point. Iron Skin. The description below it explained that the skill could turn the skin of a person's entire body into iron, capable of withstanding heavy blows. With mastery, the practitioner's skin would become a metallic color. Without any hesitation, Ling Lan immediately sent the option flying. How could a soft and delicate girl like her allow her skin to become metallic in color? It's not like she wanted to become Iron Woman. Next were the skills that required 10 honor points to redeem. There were a few more than those requiring 1 point, but when she counted them, there were only about 10 options. Ling Lan found that interesting. There was one skill which cost 1 honor point, and 10 skills which cost 10 honor points. Did that mean that there would be 50 skills which cost 50 honor points? Of course Ling Lan was just thinking about this idly. Her full attention was actually upon these 10 options before her. She only had 10 minutes after all. There was no time to waste. Eagle Claw? What? Mastery meant having claw-like hands. No can do. Iron Head? She needed to bang her head against hard objects every day. That was just asking for pain and suffering. Dismissed. Golden Finger? Practice by jabbing her fingers at trees every day. Ridiculous. Ignored. Crippling Legs? Mastery meant legs with exposed veins. Dear God, that would be terrifying. No way. Long ape arms? What? Mastery meant one's arms would become as long as an ape's. Damn it. Even though she would have to live this life as a man, she still didn't want to live as an ape man. That would be too tragic. No way in hell. Why did all these skills either change a person's appearance or require self-mutilation to achieve mastery? Ling Lan complained internally. Just as Ling Lan was about to give up on redeeming any of the 10-point skills, she noticed the final skill on the list. Rabbit Sky Leap. Rabbit Sky Leap, a conditional skill, requires a high degree of body flexibility. Minimum requirement of B rank flexibility, but A rank and above flexibility recommended. This skill does not change one's appearance after mastery, but will increase overall strength by 3 times or more. Precise increments will depend on practitioner's flexibility and intensity of practice. Please observe changes and adjust accordingly. Practice method. This Rabbit Sky Leap skill captured Ling Lan's heart immediately. It seemed like a perfectly normal skill, no torture or mutilation mentioned in its training method. Besides that, the condition seemed tailor-made for her. The basic 9 stances she had been practicing had focused specifically on increasing a body's flexibility. Instructor number 9 had clearly stated that once she mastered the 9 stances, her body flexibility would be at A rank. In general, babies were born with a flexibility of B rank, but if they didn't practice any sort of physical skill such as the 9 stances, their flexibility would decline as they grew older. A regular adult would have a flexibility between D rank to F rank. If one trained in offensive physical skills, flexibility would drop even more, perhaps not even reaching D rank. Meanwhile, a practitioner of the balanced series of physical skills would at most be able to maintain a flexibility of C rank, with exceptional cases being able to achieve B rank. As for the defensive series, there were 2 branches within the set itself, the Endurance series and the Flexible series. The Endurance series focused on increasing a body's toughness, hardening it to increase defensive ability, thus reducing flexibility. which would result in a body flexibility similar to those practicing the balanced series. Only the flexible series, as its name implied, focused on training up a body's flexibility, and would allow practitioners to achieve a flexibility of A rank and above. The basic 9 stances that Ling Lan learned were from the flexible series. The learning space had automatically assigned the flexible series to Ling Lan because she was a girl, and because her natural flexibility had already been very high. It looked like the learning space also had some recognition of gender, and had been unwilling to produce an iron-muscled woman. At this point, Ling Lan had already made her decision, but she still cautiously browsed through the skills which required 50 honor points. The quality of the skills naturally increased as the cost of the skills increased, but the associated restrictions and conditions also got increasingly tougher. Many of the skills required a certain level of body strength, resilience, or flexibility, as well as a certain level of physical skill. Ling Lan knew that even if she redeemed these skills now, she still wouldn't be able to practice them for 3 to 5 years. After all, her body was just not at that level yet. There was still much more training she had to do first. Just then, Number 1 reminded, "There is not much time left. Have you chosen?" Ling Lan smiled and said, "Yes, I choose the Rabbit Sky Leap." Number 1 warned her, "The Rabbit Sky Leap only requires 10 honor points. You still have 139 points. What else will you choose?" "Please choose immediately." Ling Lan shook her head. "I only want this one. I don't need anything else right now." Number 1 sniffed. "You still have so many honor points left. Do you really want to waste them?" Ling Lan smirked like a little fox. "Will they really be wasted?" Number 1 just stared at her placidly. His gaze was steady and indifferent, as if telling her that if she really chose only the Rabbit Sky Leap, all her remaining honor points would be cleared away. Ling Lan's resolution started to waver under Number 1's stare. Should she just redeem all her honor points now, and just wait to learn those skills later on when she met their requirements? But then that was also a problem, since she had no idea what the learning space would assign her next. If she redeemed her points now and chose something that was unsuitable for her later on, that would also be a waste. Should she gamble now, or gamble for the future? Ling Lan struggled over her decision. She lifted her head to look at Number 1, hoping to get some sort of hint from him. After all, the reason she wanted to save her honor points to begin with was because of Number 1's earlier words. Had she misunderstood what he was saying? Chapter 19, The Powerful Cheat Code. So that she could hold on to the free treatment provided by the country in her past life, over her 24 years of illness, Ling Lan had learned how to observe body language and react accordingly. She had learned how to appeal to the doctors and nurses around her, acting cute and being well-behaved. The quota for free treatment was limited, and there were always plenty of other patients waiting in line, so she knew she had to get the researchers and caregivers to like her and care for her personally. This way, subconsciously, they would want to keep her around and would put in a good word for her when necessary. Her skills in this area were no use here against Number 1, however. He was a battle-hardened veteran warrior. How could little inexperienced Ling Lan hope to glean anything from his body language? The more Ling Lan stared at Number 1, the more helpless she felt, until the point where she felt that it might be better to just redeem all her points now. After all, it'd be better than letting them all go to waste. Just as she was about to ask to continue redeeming, the system announced, "Time's up. Exchange 10 honor points for Rabbit Sky Leap. Successful." Ling Lan was abruptly jolted into awareness. Unconsciously, it had already been 10 minutes. Knowing that there was nothing else she could do, Ling Lan resolutely pushed aside all her anxiety. Since God had already helped her decide, there was no point having regrets even if she was going to lose all those honor points. It had to be said that Ling Lan was a very mature and adaptable girl. Perhaps those 24 years of torment due to illness had taught her that there was no point in obsessing over the unobtainable. The system continued to announce, 1 redemption successful. Redemption mission completed. 1 honor point awarded. Remaining honor points, 140 points, shall be reserved for the next redemption. Ling Lan was ecstatic. She had guessed correctly. As expected, honor points could be saved up, Number one's words had been a hint after all. The word use had been a subtle hint that honor points were precious, while the following statement that a random draw would be enforced after 10 minutes indirectly implied that only one exchange was required. This seemingly simple statement was actually rife with meaning. The cost of the items that could be redeemed ranged from 1 point up to several tens of thousands of points, and though Ling Lan only had 149 points, the things she could redeem were numerous. This presented a problem. If the enforced draw by the system randomly selected an item that only cost 1 point or 10 points, or perhaps even 50 points, what would happen to the rest of the unredeemed honor points? Number one's explanations had not covered any of that. Based on her previous experience, Ling Lan had quickly sensed something strange about the scenario, fearing that this was yet another trick. Perhaps this forced redemption was actually just a way for the system to teach new users how to redeem their honor points, just like how an instructor makes you practice a skill once in front of them right after they finish teaching you. Of course, Ling Lan knew that every little action of the learning space was not as simple as it seemed, so the forced redemption must have some deeper meaning beyond that. However, Ling Lan didn't think it was necessary to spend much time and effort to figure it out, so she chose the rabbit sky leap, which was most suitable for her. Not only could she practice it immediately, it was also a very subtle skill. Ling Lan was very satisfied with her choice. As for whether it was the best choice, Ling Lan was not overly concerned about that. She didn't expect the best things to just appear in her path randomly, as if she were the main character in a story, but was content to just take things as they came. Instructor number 1 was extremely pleased with Ling Lan's performance this time as well. Without further ado, he switched places with instructor number 9, who proceeded to instruct Ling Lan in the Rabbit Sky Leap as well as the next chapter of her physical skills training, the Body Refining 9 Stances. Training for the Body Refining 9 Stances was 100 times more difficult than training for the basic 9 stances. For the following month, Ling Lan trained laboriously to master the first stance with little to no effect. She couldn't even get the positioning of a single arm right. Ling Lan felt that this was a miserable mission. Judging by her current progress, she would never be able to accomplish it within the given deadline of 5 years. Fortunately, Ling Lan had a positive attitude. Even if it felt like an impossible mission, she wasn't anxious or impatient. Every day, she worked hard to conquer it little by little, in hopes that when the deadline arrived, she wouldn't be too far off the mark. Ling Lan had deduced from the first reward of honor points that the system's punishment would most likely be based on a similar principle. The less she was behind, the lighter the punishment she would receive. Very soon, it was once again the time for a session of gene agent injections. Ling Lan had assumed that this third session would be very much like the first 2 sessions, where she would just be laid on the bed to rest right after. Unexpectedly, when all the military personnel had left, Ling Lan's mother Lan Luofeng had picked her up and had walked through several hidden passages to arrive at a small room. There was almost nothing in the room, only a small single bed by one of the walls and a waist-high wooden tub in the center of the room, nothing else. The moment Lan Luofeng entered the room, she asked, "Is everything ready?" "Yes, mistress." A middle-aged woman stood within the room. Ling Lan recognized her. She was Chamberlain Lincoln's wife, Ling Nanyi. Lan Luofeng stepped forward to stand before the wooden tub. Ling Lan could now see that a little more than half the tub was full of an inky green liquid that smelled heavily of medicinal herbs. Ling Lan was deeply surprised. So far in this time period, all she had seen were medications of Western influence, such as injections or pills, which were bland and tasteless. Now, this familiar smell abruptly brought her back to the memories of her past life. She had had to drink so much of this sort of herbal concoction, but still. Ling Lan's forehead scrunched up in worry. Could it be that she was supposed to drink all of this medicinal liquid? Ling Lan felt shudders of apprehension within her heart. From her mother's and Ling Nanyi's demeanor, that tub of medicinal liquid was most certainly for her. Looking at the wooden tub once again, and then mentally comparing it to her own tiny body. Hell, Were they trying to kill her? If she finished drinking all this medicinal liquid, she would definitely be the first baby in the world to die from a distended belly due to Chinese medicine. Ling Lan's mum was not as ruthless as Ling Lan had thought. Is the temperature of the water alright? Ling Lan won't be scalded, will she? Thank God, she was supposed to bathe in it and not drink it. Ling Lan cried internal tears of relief as she hugged her mother tightly. Her life was spared. Relax, mistress, I have tested it properly. There won't be any problems, replied Ling Nanny firmly. Ling Lan was the Ling household's only hope. She would never allow any bit of carelessness when it came to Ling Lan's welfare. Lan Luofeng did not hesitate any further. In short order, she had stripped Ling Lan naked and placed her into the tub. Ling Lan felt as if she were soaking in a hot spring, warm and comfortable, when suddenly she felt a surge of heat invade the core of her body from her skin. An indescribable feeling suffused her entire body, like pain yet not pain, like an itch yet not an itch. Ling Lan, who had never before been afraid of pain, actually couldn't help but moan at the strange sensation. Lan Luofeng was startled by this and looked at Ling Nanny anxiously, wondering how Ling Lan was doing. Ling Nanny reassured her, "Mistress, this is normal, the young master is fine." As time passed, Ling Lan started getting used to the strange sensation, but then, the feeling escalated into intense pain, almost reminiscent of the body-shredding pain of her previous life. Oddly enough, this intense pain actually calmed Ling Lan down instead, as she knew she was fully capable of withstanding this sort of pain from 24 years of experience. Huh? What is this thing? Ling Lan heard Little Four exclaim within her mind. What? Although she could manage the pain, it was still nice to have someone to talk to distract her from it based on her experience. She was very happy to chit-chat with Little Four even while racked with pain. It's a very strange energy. It is actually raising the activation of your muscles and their resilience. Little Four was very surprised and curious. How was this tub of medicinal liquid brewed? There was no information on this concoction within his databases. This must be a secret formula of the Ling family, specially made for refining the body. In contrast, Ling Lan wasn't as surprised. No matter how weak and insignificant the Ling family was, they were still an old clan that had persevered for over several thousand years, so it was not at all surprising that they had developed this secret formula over the years and had passed it on through the main branch of the family, Ling Zhao's branch. Lord, the things in this world of yours are amazing. Heavens! What did I discover? This medicinal liquid is actually 96% plant-based. Little Four marveled. Who'd have thought such an amazing concoction could be made without having to utilize any sort of advanced technology? This was truly a miraculous world. Ling Lan's sweat dropped. What else would a Chinese herbal concoction be made of if not medicinal herbs? And what's the remaining 4%? Why is it so familiar? Poison? Yep. Should be a type of snake poison. And what's this? Scorpion, centipede, and spider venom. Little Four's tone of voice kept getting higher and higher until he was practically screeching. It couldn't be helped. Within this 1 year, Little Four had learned about the various creatures that could be found in human society, and although he was okay with most of them, he really had no tolerance for creepy crawlies. According to his sense of aesthetics, they were so ugly that they should be wiped from the surface of the earth. Ling Lan chose to ignore Little Four's manic flailing in her mind. She was busy marveling at the fact that she was actually going through a purification ritual like some main character in one of those novels she had read. Yep, traveling to the future was not too bad after all. The cheat code of the god of time and space travel was pretty powerful. Chapter 20. Ling Lan is a glutton. Lan Luofeng and Ling Nanny stood beside Ling Lan and anxiously observed her expression and body condition. This medicinal liquid needed to be bathed in while conscious for maximum effect. The effects would be greatly weakened if the bather lost consciousness, and the first soak was the one with the greatest impact. Ling Nanny saw that although Ling Lan's little forehead was all scrunched up, her facial expression did not show any signs of the savage struggle that other children had during these baths. She nodded approvingly, as expected of their master's child. This tolerance level was extraordinary. If their master was still around, he would probably be greatly heartened that he had such a reliable descendant. Every time Ling Lan's face twitched, Lan Luofeng subconsciously wanted to pull Ling Lan back into her arms. The pain in her eyes eclipsed the pain that Ling Lan was enduring. She really did not want to see her own child going through this sort of crushing pain. She had never forgotten what Ling Zhao had once said about the medicinal liquid. He had said that it was very effective, but it also inflicted tremendous pain in the process. Lan Luofeng's gaze shone with boundless sorrow, and tears glimmered in the corners of her eyes. Ling Nanyi sensed Lan Luofeng's reluctance and tried to comfort her. "Mistress, you need to bear it and let it happen. This will help build up the young master's foundation so he can live a better life in the future. In the end, this world is still a world where the strong triumph. Without true strength, we will not be able to protect what the master left behind." Lan Luofeng nodded. "I know. It's all right. I can bear this." I believe that Ling Lan can continue holding on too. Ling Nanyi was right. A strong foundation was necessary for her child to be able to live freely in the future. Meanwhile, I need to go research this formula. It's too miraculous. If I can understand the medicinal properties and how they work together, perhaps I may be able to develop a new agent. Lord, I'll be going now. Take your time soaking. Without any remorse whatsoever, Little Four abandoned Ling Lan and ran off to his research lab to pursue his next great invention. Hells, this heartless bastard. Ling Lan, who had been hoping that Little Four would continue talking with her to share her pain, was full of contempt for his selfish actions. Later, she would definitely teach Little Four a lesson and would make sure he understood that nothing was more important than his lord. The intense pain caused Ling Lan's body to spasm uncontrollably, low moans spilling in an endless stream from her mouth. Suddenly, she recalled that her qi exercises could somewhat alleviate this sort of pain, and quickly began practicing them. It actually worked. The pain was greatly dampened and became bearable again. The violent spasms of Ling Lan's body just now made Lan Luofeng and Ling Nanyi even more anxious. But while Lan Luofeng was purely heartsick over Ling Lan's suffering, Ling Nanyi was concerned over what would come next. She knew that the next half hour would be the most critical period of the medicinal bath, and it was also the part that was most difficult to bear. Most of the children would faint then. Even their master had become comatose, though still aware, for half a day back when he had endured this coming half hour. Perhaps the qi exercises Ling Lan practiced had been deeply ingrained into her body memory since she had been practicing them since she was in the womb, for Ling Lan entered into a deep meditative state very quickly. She could no longer feel the pain racking her body, but merely felt as if she was submerged in a miasma of heat. Seeing Ling Lan's slack face, Lan Luofeng relaxed in turn. It looked like Ling Lan had managed to overcome yet another hurdle. On the other hand, Ling Nanyi was confused since she knew the true properties of the medicinal liquid. Could it be that the herbal contents had been absorbed entirely? She peered at the inky green water. The saturation of the color indicated that there was still plenty of herbal content left. If so, then the pain should still be present and should have even intensified at this point. It seemed like their young master Ling Lan was either a child with abnormally high pain tolerance, or else had deficient pain receptors, being less sensitive than the average child. Ling Nanyi was leaning more toward the latter possibility, since it was rather inconceivable that a 1.5-year-old child would have such a high pain tolerance. This misconception of Ling Nanyi would bring even greater suffering to Ling Lan in her future training, as the Ling family tried to compensate for her deficient pain receptors by intensifying their training, so that she could know what true pain was like. After an indeterminate amount of time, still groggy from her trance, Ling Lan sensed that she had been picked up from the tub and placed on the bed. Someone started massaging her gently, and Ling Lan felt so comfortable that she could stand it no longer, and fell asleep. After sending away the military personnel, Lincoln had been standing guard outside the room all this while. Seeing them come out of the room, he asked intently, "How was the effect?" Ling Nanyi could not contain her elation. She nodded vigorously as she reported, "The effect was much better than expected. All areas have been improved by 30 to 80%. Lincoln almost broke down at these words. Really? It should be known that throughout the history of administering these medicinal baths, Master Ling Zhao had recorded the best effects so far. That year, the recorded improvements had only been between 10 to 50%. Seeing Ling Nani nod decisively in confirmation, Lincoln couldn't stop his tears from falling as he muttered fervently, "God bless our Ling family. God bless our Ling family." Ling Nani surreptitiously grabbed hold of her old companion's hand. She knew how much this news meant to her husband. Although Master Ling Zhao had been the master of the Ling family, he had been raised at the knee of her husband. Lincoln had loved Ling Zhao like a son, and his passing had been as hard on her husband as it had been on the mistress. Looks like the young master has inherited the physical qualities of Master Ling Zhao, being able to absorb 10 tubes of gene-stimulating agent, and even being able to get a better effect from the medicinal bath, Ling Nani said, wondering. Lincoln was still overwhelmed by his emotions, and could only nod emphatically in agreement with tears in his eyes. The old Ling couple could only interpret it this way. They could not know that effects of the bath were so remarkable because of the qi exercises. The shifting of the body's energies during the exercise had greatly increased its absorption ability, allowing the medicine to permeate even deeper into the body, hence resulting in improvements like never before. Just like that, Ling Lan began her life of medicinal baths. That aside, she continued to contort herself into bizarre poses that stretched the limits of the human body every day. Of course, she practiced those poses in secret, lest her mum grow frantic with concern. 1 year passed after another as Ling Lan slowly grew up. Before she knew it, she had become a bona fide glutton, able to eat her mum's full day of meals in one sitting. Heavens! She was only 4 years old. Was she destined to grow sideways? That won't do. Today, she must diet. After all, she had a dream to be a child with 4 greats: great ideals, great morals, great discipline, and great goals. She must not lose to her own stomach. Ling Lan was just cheering herself on when she noticed that the large serving of fried noodles before her had vanished. With a constipated expression, she muttered to herself at the insufficiency of the noodles. They hadn't satisfied her hunger much at all. Rubbing her flat tummy, she mentally cautioned herself not to eat any more. A sudden shift in facial expressions, and Ling Lan slapped a sure hand onto the table, shouting, "Give this young master an extra-large serving of beef steak." Damn it, hunger pangs were the worst. Ling Lan would much rather suffer pain than hunger pangs. Oh well, she was already planning to live as a man this life after all. If she ended up becoming a cool and stylish, elegant and poised, unparalleled handsome gentleman, and caused the women of the world to fall for her and fight over her, that would be a catastrophe. So, for the sake of those clueless women and to minimize her sin, and also so that other men will be able to wed and graduate from bachelorhood, she should just go ahead and become a little fatter. Ahem, ahem, she was such a soft-hearted person. Ling Lan, moved by her own self-sacrificial attitude, resolutely took a large bite of the freshly served steak before her. It should be noted that Ling Lan was very quick to adjust her worldview just so she had an excuse to indulge in her gluttony. Chapter 21. The intricacies of the qi exercises. Ling Lan's consistently voracious appetite once again pushed Lan Luofeng into a quandary. It was a blessing that her child could eat, but was it really alright for Ling Lan to eat so much? Lincoln and Ling Nani were asking themselves the same question as well. Ling Lan's appetite could certainly be classified as monstrous, even if one tried to explain it away as a sign that her body needed energy. The amount of food she consumed was still rather hard to accept. Looking at Ling Lan's petite figure, however, they could only shake their heads and sigh. It just didn't make sense. Could it be that their young master's stomach was from an alternate dimension? With time, Lan Luofeng's worries proved to be unnecessary. Although Ling Lan ate a lot, her body did not change much besides growing a little taller. Her waistline remained the same. Furthermore, unlike the other children who received injections of the gene-stimulating agent, she did not bulk up, but looked rather weak and skinny instead. Accordingly, Lan Luofan banished all thoughts of getting Ling Lan to diet. Her child was already so weak and skinny even after eating so much. If she made her diet, wouldn't her child end up a fragile bean sprout? Better to let her eat as she likes. It's not like the Ling household had any problem supplying that much food. From then onwards, no one ever contested Ling Lan's appetite again. In the end, whenever Ling Lan ate just a little bit less than usual, such as skipping out on a bowl of fried rice or a steak, the entire Ling household would descend into a panic. The young master's appetite had weakened. Could it be that he was ill? Habit was certainly a powerful thing. Ling Lan herself was very puzzled at her own condition, and so quietly asked Little Four to investigate. Reliable as ever, Little Four soon provided an answer. The reason Ling Lan was so trim and skinny compared to the other children who received agent injections was that the bulk put on by those children was actually a physical symptom of the accumulation of impurities within their bodies. Of course, this result was not an entirely bad thing. On the plus side, it indirectly strengthened the physical toughness of a child's body, making it able to withstand a certain level of impact. On the flip side, it would decrease a child's flexibility and lower the body's resilience. Meanwhile, the agent Ling Lan was absorbing contained no impurities due to Little Four's interference, so there was no buildup of impurities within her body, and consequently no physical bulk. As for Ling Lan's large appetite, it was due to Ling Lan's training in advanced physical skills within her mind space. The training sapped a lot of energy, so Ling Lan had no choice but to increase her intake of food to replenish the energy used. Part of this could also be explained by the Ling family's secret medicinal formula. It had increased the storage capacity of Ling Lan's body so that it could store the energy from 2 bowls of rice in the same space others needed to store 1 bowl's worth of energy. Naturally, the more energy stored up by the body, the greater the energy potential. The long and short of it was that it was advantageous for Ling Lan. As for why Ling Lan seemed weak and fragile, Little Four was unsure. He searched for a long time before cautiously suggesting that the qi exercises Ling Lan had learned in her past life were to blame. After getting these answers from Little Four, Ling Lan was reassured. As long as there was no harm, Ling Lan didn't mind becoming a glutton, especially since she could indulge her taste buds at the same time. However, Ling Lan's pleasant days of pure feasting and sleeping didn't last very long. Soon, she had been mercilessly thrown into training under Chamberlain Lincoln by her mother. Apparently, at 5 years old, it was time for her to start learning the hereditary Ling family martial arts. On the very first day, Ling Lan already caught a glimpse of the hard days ahead. The Ling family martial arts were of the harsh variety. There were no shortcuts. All improvements could only be achieved through hard training. A quota of punches and kicks had to be completed every day, or else no rest was allowed. When Ling Lan finally finished her last kick for the day, she immediately dropped to the ground, immobile. Ling Nani, who had been standing watch by her side, picked her up tenderly and brought her directly to the hidden room for her medicinal bath, in hopes that it would soothe Ling Lan's exhausted muscles. The moment Ling Lan entered the medicinal bath, she knew that something was different with today's bath. There was no pain at all, only a tingling warmth which was so comfortable that she was almost lulled to sleep. Little Four chose to pipe up at this moment, saying derisively, "This physical skill set is no match for the learning spaces. It can easily cause problems for the body. If it weren't for this medicinal bath, any child who practiced it would be damaged beyond repair." Ling Lan chuckled bitterly. "It's not like I can choose not to practice it. I have no choice but to continue. I really don't want to see the disappointed faces of the old couple." In her past life, Ling Lan had seen disappointment too many times on her parents' faces. So now, whenever she was on the verge of giving up, the disappointment that would appear in Lincoln and Ling Nani's eyes would change her mind, giving her another boost of determination to hang on. This was truly self-inflicted. Even though Ling Lan knew this was one of her personal demons, she just couldn't throw off the influence of her past life so easily. After the bath, Little Four found that the damage caused by the training to Ling Lan's body had not been completely repaired by the medicinal concoction. Although the problem was relatively minor right now, It was a seed that would grow into a serious affliction if things continued as they were. Thus, Little Four planned to convince Ling Lan to find a way to skip tomorrow's training. However, early the next day, to his immense shock, he found that all the remaining damage he had sensed the day before had disappeared without a trace. In fact, Ling Lan's body was in a better condition than it had been even before the damage was inflicted. In disbelief, Little Four scrambled to ask Ling Lan what she had done the night before. Ling Lan was befuddled, unsure what Little Four was asking for. Little Four frantically clarified that he needed to know what Ling Lan had done the night before besides sleep. This was indeed relatively important. If he could find out the cause, it would be a revolutionary discovery. Even in the technologically advanced world he came from, it was impossible to fully repair damage to the body with just medicinal solutions. Full repair required some sort of equivalent sacrifice, such as a reduction of life force or cell energy. Although these sort of sacrifices had no discernible negative effect in the short term, they would cause endless trouble in the long run. Ling Lan's situation was entirely different, however. Somehow, she had managed to achieve a full recovery without any sort of sacrifice. Her life force had not been weakened but had instead grown even stronger, while the stored energy within her body was even richer than before. All of this was proof that Ling Lan did not draw on any of her body's resources to repair the damage. Ling Lan thought the matter over seriously before hesitantly telling Little Four that she might have practiced her qi exercises right before bed. At her response, Little Four insisted that Ling Lan continue to attend today's training, and to follow it up with the qi exercises at night. The results proved that Little Four's suspicions were correct. As expected, the circulation of energy prompted by the qi exercises once again repaired the body to its optimum condition, just as it did the first day. Little Four watched the entire process in awe. Who'd have thought that a primitive planet with fledgling technology would have such a miraculous thing? The qi exercises not only had the ability to nourish the body's life force, but could also incorporate a portion of the body's energy into its active circuit to improve and maintain the body in such a way that would go undetected by technological means. Little Four could only see it now because Ling Lan was his host, so they were sharing spiritual energy. Otherwise, he would never have believed that such a hidden wonder actually existed in the world. Little Four felt a smidgen of regret. If only he had known that primitive world had such wondrous things, he would have paid more attention and started gathering them from the very beginning. Unfortunately, it was all too late now. Chapter 22, A Life Free from Debt. A year's time went by quickly, and Ling Lan was soon about to turn 6. Ling Lan, who had always complained that time moved too slowly, was now singing a different tune, complaining that time was moving too fast instead. Since she had officially started learning the Ling family martial arts at the age of 5, Ling Lan had been able to freely practice the body refining 9 stances. In this 1 year's time, she had managed to achieve 3 times more than what she had managed in the previous 3.5 years. Before the age of 5, she had only barely mastered the 4th stance, but she had mastered the following 3 stances after that within this past year. It should be noted that the body refining 9 stances only got harder the further you progressed, each stance requiring even more time and effort to master than the stance before it. Unfortunately, Ling Lan did not have any room to relax despite that. In fact, her stress levels only increased from that point onwards. The deadline for her to master the body refining 9 stances was fast approaching. She only had 6 months left, and she had yet to master the 8th stance, not to mention the even more challenging 9th stance. She desperately wished that she could squeeze every second of her day into training, even holding combat poses during mealtimes and inhaling her food at top speed so she could get back to training sooner. This greatly dismayed her mother Lan Luofen, who began to tearfully repent before a photo of Ling Lan's father. She felt that she had failed her husband by not raising their child right. Ling Lan had none of the decorum and grace of an established family clan member. Amidst this chaos, the final deadline arrived. Although Ling Lan had successfully mastered the 8th stance, the 9th stance was still incomplete despite her best efforts. Ling Lan really did not want to face instructor number 1. Unfortunately, The learning space was merciless and would not allow Ling Lan to escape. The moment the timer hit 0, Ling Lan's consciousness had been dragged into the learning space. When she entered the learning space for her physical skills course, the first thing she noticed was that the air seemed colder than usual. Instructor number 1 was already standing in wait, his posture razor sharp, and he seemed to have been waiting for a long time. Ling Lan rubbed her arms, trying to get her goosebumps to subside. It was impossible for Ling Lan to hold her composure against the menacing cold air emanating from such a formidable warrior. Number 1's aura was currently much colder compared to the other 2 times Ling Lan had met him. Even though his eyes maintained their usual calm, not a ripple of emotion in sight, Ling Lan could still clearly read the signs of Number 1's deep displeasure. Crap. Number 1 must be very unhappy with her performance this time. Ling Lan's sense of danger was very healthy. She immediately adopted a serious manner, head bowed and eyes lowered as she said, "Instructor number 1, I'm sorry, I've disappointed you." Number 1 replied coolly, "There's no need for that. We are only here to guide and instruct. Whether or not you appreciate it means nothing to us." "You are apologizing to the wrong person." Although Number 1 said all this with his usual indifference and aloofness, Ling Lan could feel the underlying dissatisfaction running through his response. Ling Lan felt like crying. "Oh, Instructor number 1. What do you really mean? What do you want me to do?" Although Ling Lan was complaining internally, her face showed none of this as she kept her head bowed in respectful silence. Ultimately, Ling Lan was actually feeling somewhat guilty. She had really wasted a lot of time in the first 3 years of the given timeline. She had not practiced seriously back then, although a large part of it could be blamed on her wariness of her watchful guardians in the Ling household. During that time, she would only practice in the depths of the night while her mother was sleeping, thus only managing about 5 to 6 hours of training each day. This greatly hobbled the speed of her progress. Although she had been free to train as much as she wanted after she started her training in the Ling family martial arts, she had not been able to make up for the time she had wasted in those first 3 years. Training in the body refining 9 stances. 8 stances mastered. Mastery of the 9th stance at 69%. Mission incomplete. Punishment options. 1. A deduction of 200 honor points. Lacking points can be compensated with other options. 2. Corporal punishment. 200 jolts of electric shock. 3. Exchange honor points for an extension of the deadline. Punishment will be doubled if mission is still unable to be completed. Please make your choice. The learning space announced all of Ling Lan's punishment options in its unforgiving flat tone. The options were both a shock and a relief to Ling Lan. What shocked her was the harshness of the punishments, between the large deduction of honor points, and the shocking corporal punishment. She did not want to choose either unless she had no other choice. Honor points had proven to be supremely precious, so she was unwilling to lose them this way, while the corporal punishment was ahem, she really had no masochistic tendencies. On the other hand, Ling Lan was relieved that the system provided a chance for her to fix the situation. The only catch was the possible doubling of the current punishment. Just thinking about it made Ling Lan's little heart shudder in terror, and she could feel a chill creeping up her spine. "Tone icy," Number 1 asked. "Speak. Which do you choose?" Ling Lan asked carefully. "Instructor number 1, could you please explain the third option to me?" If she did not have to spend much honor points in exchange, she was willing to try it. Number 1 gave her a cool look as he said in clipped tones, "You can use 10 honor points to extend your deadline by 30 days. In those 30 days, you may continue to practice the body refining 9 stances. If you can master it in that time frame, the punishment will be cancelled. If you fail, the punishment will be doubled." Ling Lan's heart leapt. 10 honor points were an acceptable loss in her opinion, although it was a little harder to decide whether she could really master the final 9th stance within 30 days. Truthfully, Ling Lan was not at all confident of her chances. She may really only need 1 more month to master the stance, but she could just as easily require 2 months or 3 months. or perhaps even one more year. Ling Lan remembered very well that instructor number 9 had told her that mastering the 9th stance required a certain degree of chance and enlightenment. Mastery would be impossible without one or the other. Should she take the risk and try? Ling Lan hesitated, but in the end, she just could not sacrifice the precious honor points she had earned, nor could she convince herself to take the corporal punishment. So she decided to take the plunge and chose the third option. The moment Ling Lan stated her choice, she felt the temperature of the room rise to a more comfortable degree. Number 1 decisively processed her choice for her, and before Ling Lan could ask any more questions, she had been summarily kicked out of the physical skills learning area. All Ling Lan could remember was a final cold stare, full of threat, a clear warning that she had better complete her mission properly this time. Back at the general learning space, Ling Lan did not even spare the time to greet Little Four before hurrying back out to the real world to train. Although Ling Lan had no idea what number 1's final threat-filled gaze was meant to convey, she knew down to her very bones that if she did not manage to master the body-refining 9 stances by this new deadline, she would die a very gruesome death. And so, Ling Lan trained like a demon possessed in the subsequent month. Every day, she would train until she only had enough energy left to keep breathing before she dared to stop. Under this brutal routine, Ling Lan finally succeeded in mastering the 9th stance. When Ling Lan entered the physical skills learning space and found that there was only 10 seconds left till the deadline, she broke out into a cold sweat. Honestly, till the very last moment, she herself was unsure whether she would be able to complete the mission in time. All she could think of was to keep circulating her internal energy, and push her body into the motions of the body-refining 9 stances over and over again. A rather stupid approach perhaps, but this reckless method may have led to the final push that Ling Lan needed. Ling Lan had trained to the point where her consciousness had started to blur. When she felt like a mental wall on the edge of her mind had crumbled, her body had started going through all the poses of the body-refining 9 stances involuntarily, imprinting all the hard work she had put into learning the 9 stances firmly into her body. Just like that, Ling Lan resolved the sword of Damocles, 1, hanging by her neck, and finally returned to a life free from debt. 1. Having a sword of Damocles over you means you're facing an imminent threat, usually one involving great peril. Chapter 23, The Scout Academy's Test. Little young master, are you ready? Standing before the room where the strength test was taking place, Lincoln's expression was even more nervous than Ling Lan's, who was about to be tested. Ling Lan's lips twitched. This Grandpa Chamberlain had completely lost his usual calm ever since they had entered the Scout Academy. Did he really have such little faith in her? Well, of course there were things that were out of her control, like, who knew that the test of intelligence would be so incomprehensible? Recalling her shame in that part of the test, Ling Lan's face darkened. Still, to reassure her Grandpa Chamberlain, who truly loved her from the depths of his heart, she said, "Relax, Grandpa Kin. I promise I will complete the mission." If not out of sincere worry for her, why would Lincoln lose his usual composure? He was a trained combat expert. At her words, Lincoln seemed put at ease. That'll do. Ling Lan was standing here now because it was finally time for little Ling Lan to enter a Scout Academy. According to Federation law, every child must enroll at a Scout Academy at the age of 6. And receive 10 years of mandatory schooling there. So even if Lan Luofeng was reluctant, she had no choice but to bring Ling Lan to the Scout Academy to take the enrollment tests which would decide which class she would be in. There were 4 parts to the enrollment tests: intelligence, strength, stamina, and speed. The first part, the intelligence test, was easy. It was so easy that most did not even consider it a real test, as all they did was let the child being tested talk to the appointed examiner for 3 to 5 minutes, and then the results were out. Ling Lan only scored 80 marks in this test, placed among the sea of 90 marks scored by the other children. This score was humiliating, leaving Ling Lan speechless. Till now, She still could not figure out how her mature mentality honed over 30 years of life had lost to the intelligence of those 6-year-old brats. How did that even make sense? Who knew how those examiners determined the scores? There did not seem to be any basis whatsoever. Regardless of how wronged Ling Lan felt, she had no choice but to accept this result. According to regulations, any objections about scoring could only be raised after all parts of the enrollment test had been completed. The second test was the test of strength. Ling Lan grimly swore that she would redeem herself in the following tests. No way would she let those little brats continue to beat her. The learning space in her mind was no joke. Finally, Ling Lan's name was called. As she prepared herself to enter the testing room, Lincoln pressed lightly on Ling Lan's little shoulder. "Do you remember what the mistress told you? You must not disappoint the mistress." Lan Luofeng was waiting for them outside the academy. Perhaps worried that her agitation would affect Ling Lan's performance, she had decided to remain outside and wait for them to come tell her the final results. Ling Lan obediently nodded her head. "Yes, Ling Lan will do it. Mummy should relax. Uncle Ken too." Acting cute was rather embarrassing, but this was the only way to reassure these people who loved and cared for her, so Ling Lan had learned to ignore her shame and just do it. Under Lincoln's fond gaze, Ling Lan stepped into the examination room. In the area set aside for the strength test, 2 soldiers in military uniforms were seated in one of the rooms. One of the officers was flipping through Ling Lan's intelligence test results and its accompanying examiner comments. The shockingly low 80 marks stood out starkly, causing him to frown, but he could not help but exclaim in surprise when he saw the examiner comments written below it. Curious at his partner's reaction, the other officer asked, "What's up?" Calm and collected, no sign of leaps of logic. Lacking imagination. "We've been in charge of testing children for almost 3 years, but I don't think we've seen these sort of comments before." After listening to these comments, the other officer said with some dissatisfaction, "I'm not going to comment on the rest, but what's wrong with calm and collected? In battle, only the calm survive. Isn't this scoring a bit ridiculous? Who do you think is in charge of intelligence testing? They would never let this sort of child who's hard to brainwash and hard to win over into the special classes and waste their resources." The officer who had read out the comments curled his lips, full of scorn for the examiners of the intelligence testing. "Hee, that's true. Those great clans are only concerned with recruiting talent for their clans for their own profit, having long forgotten about the good of the Federation. Quite a few promising talents have been shunted into the regular classes because of them, losing the chance to be cultivated with better resources, and in doing so losing the Federation some great talent," the other officer said with some regret. "Unfortunately, those people had both power and authority, and held a lot of influence and decisive power. For example, they have claimed priority in arranging the enrollment classes of the Scout Academy, letting them place students loyal to them in the better classes. The other common soldiers involved in the process were powerless even if they wanted to help some of the unaffiliated talents. Hopefully this child will perform better in the following tests, or else he will have no hope of getting into Special Class A. Class A? He should thank his lucky stars if he gets into Class B. He might just end up being pushed into one of the regular classes." The other officer did not think highly of Ling Lan's chances with such a low intelligence score. "Hello, examiners. Ling Lan is here for testing," said Ling Lan loudly. When she had entered the room, the 2 officers were in deep whispering conversation, so she had walked up till she was about 2 meters from them before standing at attention and announcing her presence. "Oh, he's got presence." One of the officers laughed. They were used to seeing nervous and timid children, so it was rather refreshing to meet one so brash and unafraid. At heart, Ling Lan was an adult, and she had also had to withstand Instructor Number 1's terrifying killing aura more than once. The weak presence of the 2 officers before her was really no threat at all in her eyes. The other officer smiled kindly, and pointed over to a row of barbells at one corner of the room, saying, "Lift the barbell that you can lift. Don't force yourself. This is just a test, not a competition." Hearing this, Ling Lan nodded. She walked over to the barbells, and saw that each barbell was labeled with their weight. Ling Lan knew her body well. She had finished learning the foundational stage of the Ling family martial arts, and had now moved on to train in combat techniques, so she was very clear on the limits of her strength. Ling Lan did not choose immediately, but turned to ask, "Could you tell me which weight would give full marks?" Her abysmal intelligence score meant that Ling Lan needed to get as much marks as she could in the remaining 3 tests, because she just had to qualify for the special classes. This was also the mission given to her by her mom. It wasn't that Lan Luofeng wanted the glory, but only those students enrolled in the special classes had the right to build their own study plans, select their preferred instructors, and choose to stay at home, for the sake of protecting Ling Lan's secret. This was the only option. The 2 officers glanced at each other. This child was certainly full of himself. Even now they would not dare to claim that they could lift 500 caddies one. And this child wanted to take on the 100 marks challenge. 500 caddies, one of the officers finally replied. At this, Ling Lan strolled over casually to stand before the 500 caddy barbell. She clenched her fists over the bar, considering 500 caddies was already slightly over her best established record. If she were to brute force it, she could be injured if she was unlucky. Still, Ling Lan wanted to try. After all, it was not like there was no chance of success, and she had her reliable chi exercises to fall back on if she really did get injured, so she was not afraid of the consequences. Of course, another reason why Ling Lan wanted to try was that the strength test was a section where points were easy to get. The marks in this section were all objective. How much you could lift equaled how much score you would get, unlike in the following tests of stamina and speed where there was some room for interpretation. Although Ling Lan also had confidence for the next 2 tests, she was also wary of inexplicably losing marks again like in the intelligence test. Still, Ling Lan would not recklessly go ahead and lift the barbell. She wanted to protect her body as much as she could, so she surreptitiously circulated her chi once and filled her entire body with energy. Only then did she grab hold of the bar with all her might, lifting up the barbell with a mighty bellow. She waited till the monitor rang out with the signal sound of success before placing the barbell down again. The heavy thud of the barbell hitting the floor aroused the dumbfounded officers from their stupor. He really did it. The 2 officers' shock and disbelief were writ all over their faces. One of them even ran over to the monitor display to take a closer look. When he saw the distinct word of success on the screen, he was instantly too excited for words. Who'd have thought that after 3 years, I'd have a candidate come out of my hands with a full strength score? The officer was both moved and proud. This wasn't the intelligence test, where the score could be manipulated due to its black box workings. This result was a direct reflection of strength. He was actually witness to the birth of a new combat genius. The higher the strength, the easier training would be, approximately half the effort for the same results. The 2 officers wrote down Ling Lan's score with excitement and added their comments at the bottom. Their comment consisted of only 2 words. Combat genius. Only these 2 words could represent what they felt at this very moment. In their excitement, they did not notice Ling Lan's strange pensive expression when she put down the barbell. Of course Ling Lan was puzzled. She actually still had strength to spare when she lifted the barbell. She had initially thought that 500 caddies would be a little beyond her limits, but when she actually lifted the weight, it was rather easy. Gee, could it be that she had eaten some sort of strength-enhancing pill without her knowledge? Unable to figure it out, Ling Lan could only let it go for now as she walked out of the room and got ready for the next test. Chapter 24. The overly friendly little boy. Ling Lan assumed that the following tests would still be conducted individually, but unexpectedly, she found that that wasn't the case when she arrived at the site of the next test. Both the stamina test and the speed test would be held at the same place, the Academy's large field. When Ling Lan and Lincoln arrived at the field and tried to enter, Lincoln was immediately stopped by one of the waiting staff members at the entrance. He told them that parents and guardians were not allowed to accompany their child into the testing area. Ling Lan did not need Lincoln's company to begin with. She had only let him tag along since she wasn't able to refuse his kind intentions. Now, seeing Lincoln's worried eyes, she hurried to reassure him before saying a firm goodbye and entering the field. These thoughtful actions were noted by the staff member escorting Ling Lan into the field. "You are surprisingly considerate," praised the staff member. Among the many children who came for testing, he had seen many who cried and fussed, threw tantrums, or clung to their guardians. In contrast, Ling Lan's mature handling of the situation amazed him. Ling Lan merely smiled without saying anything in reply. She couldn't very well say that she was already over 30 years old, which was why she wasn't going to cling to her parents like other children, right? Ling Lan's calm and even-tempered attitude may have endeared her to the staff member, for he decided to provide an explanation as he pointed out the other children waiting ahead on the field grounds. "There are the children waiting to be tested. That group on the far right with less people is the commoner children. The middle group consists of children from military backgrounds, while the largest group on the left is made up of the descendants of the elite families." Ling Lan looked towards where he pointed, and saw that there were already a lot of people gathered on the grass, all of whom were children enrolling for the year. On the planet of Doha, there were countless scout academies just like this one. However, the one Ling Lan was trying to enroll in was reputed to be the best in Doha, with no close competition. Just to qualify for the enrollment tests, one had to either be from an elite family or a military family with a reserved spot, or else they would have to be like Ling Lan, who was an inheritor of premium military benefits. Those who inherited premium military benefits could come from commoner families, elite families, or even military systems, so the children on the field had knowingly or unknowingly drifted into three distinct camps. Of course, if any of them failed the enrollment tests here, they would have to settle for the Scout Academy closest to their residence. This was the harsh reality of the matter. The Central Scout Academy of the planet of Doha only accepted the best. They would not lower their standards just to boost their enrollment rates. However, it should be noted that a large majority of the children who failed were those from the commoner families. The Academy had released a statement to the public explaining that these children's physical fitness was not up to the Academy's standards. Whether that was true or if there was something fishy behind the matter, we will never know, because every year, this academy, which claimed to only accept the best, would still open 2 exception classes for enrollment. To qualify, you'd have to have wealth, power, and status. Ling Lan knew the staff member was trying to help her, so she responded with a bright smile. "Thank you." It should be noted that Ling Lan had a beautiful smile. This smile had been deeply ingrained into her bones, and as long as someone treated her well and with sincerity, she would be generous with it. In her past life, this smile had earned her the goodwill and affection of all the doctors and nurses who had treated her. And now, combined with the attractive face born from her good genes in this life, the sweetness of her smile had only intensified. The staff member stared for a long moment, besotted, and then, he rubbed his nose lightly, peering around to the left and right. When he saw that no one else was paying attention, he said to her, "Little boy, don't smile like that in the future. It's for your own good." If this child did not have enough social and political clout, it was better if he was more careful with his smile. Perhaps it wasn't as dangerous now due to his young age, but in another 5 or 10 years, this smile of his could very well be a problem. Ling Lan was taken aback by this unexpected advice, but before she could ask about it, they had arrived at the fringes of the crowd and it was no longer safe to ask. Ling Lan could only wave goodbye under the staff member's fond and worried gaze. "Little Four, what do you think that person wanted to say?" asked Ling Lan with a slight frown on her face. Little Four said nothing, but played a recording of Ling Lan's previous smile within her mind. Till now, Ling Lan had never seen her current smile, though she knew that her original smile had been sweet enough to make people lower their guard and ease their spirits. However, looking at her smile now, she finally understood why that staff member had tried to warn her. Damn it, looks like beauty is also a burden. In the past, she could only be considered pretty at most, with a sweet smile that could warm people's hearts. But now, Her androgynous appearance and her very attractive face somehow made that same sweet smile even sweeter, adding an almost seductive quality to it, and this was still as a 6-year-old. If she were a little older, Ling Lan was not so naive as to believe that gay relationships did not exist in this era. Although she was a girl in reality, she still did not want a gay man to confess feelings for her. Right then and there, Ling Lan decided that she could never smile like that again. As Ling Lan neared the 3 groups, the children in all the groups started looking over at her curiously. As mentioned earlier, Ling Lan was a really good-looking child. Even among the multitude of handsome men and beautiful women in this world, she would still be considered a top-notch beauty. With the honesty of youth, the children directly expressed their appreciation of her beauty with their focused attention. A pretty child was always popular. In this manner, before Ling Lan could decide which group she should join, a well-built boy from the middle military group had started waving enthusiastically at her, shouting, "Here! Here, come quick." Ling Lan was nonplussed. Who the hell was this passionate fellow? He didn't look familiar to her at all. Still, his greeting helped her solve one of her worries, so she started walking slowly in his direction. Her slow pace was intentional. What if she had mistaken his greeting when he had actually meant it for someone else behind her? She wanted to avoid that embarrassment if possible. However, it was soon proven that Ling Lan's caution was unnecessary. That boy really had been calling out to her, because he had already run over to grab her hand in impatience before she had covered half the distance. Ling Lan stared at the hand that covered her own with some consternation. Who the hell was he? How could he just grab her hand without asking, as if they were familiar friends? Don't judge Ling Lan for her reaction. In the history of both of her lives, this was the first time a strange man, little boy, had held her hand. Our intrepid little student Ling Lan was actually feeling shy. They entered the group to the place the boy had run out from, but before the boy could say anything, a sulky voice could be heard saying, "Qilong, who's he?" Ling Lan looked towards the voice and saw that it was a plump little girl who had spoken. The girl glared at her fiercely, as if she had taken away her favorite possession. Ling Lan was rendered speechless once again. Did all children in this time go through puberty so early? This girl had already learned how to be jealous. That aside, shouldn't she take a closer look before getting jealous? Couldn't she see that he was a little boy right now? Ling Lan was also a little puzzled, as she felt that she probably looked better than Qilong in her current body. Why did the plump little girl not seem to notice this, but had chosen without question to be jealous of her instead of wanting to get close to her? Could it be that she was just not the girl's type? What Ling Lan did not know was that this world was no longer like her previous world where leanness was considered attractive. Here, the children were all raised with the understanding that stoutness, bulk, and health were beautiful, so Ling Lan's weak and fragile bean-sprout look was not going to appeal to most of the female population, no matter how attractive her features were. Qilong had no idea that his little follower was jealous, focusing instead on introducing Ling Lan to his friends. "He was the one who was being tested before me in the strength test. Don't look down on him cause he's skinny, he's really strong." Qilong liked to befriend those who he felt were stronger than him, as he felt that he could become stronger by mingling with them. Ling Lan blinked. So that's how Qilong knew her. Chapter 25, Companions in the Same Group. Ling Lan couldn't suppress her curiosity. "How did you find out?" The results were supposed to be confidential, only known by the examiners. Also, those examiners had been enlisted from various military regions, and so knew how to keep their mouths shut. With some embarrassment, Qilong replied, "Actually, when I went in for my test, the 2 examiners were talking about you, saying that you were a rare genius with unparalleled strength. I figured that if even the examiners said so, your strength must be ginormous." Fine. Looks like the examiners got carried away in their excitement and accidentally revealed some hints. But this gregarious fellow was also surprisingly observant, having managed to grab hold of the most important information immediately. "Oh right. What's your name?" "I'm Qilong. He's Han Jijian. We grew up together, and he's the bestest of my best friends." Qilong had no sense of the typical first-time reservations when meeting strangers. He had jumped straight into an enthusiastic introduction of the little boy standing beside the plump little girl. His expression as he spoke seemed as if he were showing off, causing Ling Lan to throw a curious glance at this boy who Qilong seemed proud to know. The little boy seemed very serious, giving no outward reaction to Qilong's enthusiasm other than to slightly nod at Ling Lan, although his eyes held an unmistakable trace of appraisal. Of course, this was due to his young age. If he had been just a bit older, he might have been able to do so more subtly. However, his assessing gaze did not make Ling Lan uncomfortable, because Ling Lan knew that he meant no harm by it, and that he was only trying to decide if Ling Lan was someone worthy of being befriended by his good friend Qilong. Thus, Ling Lan was instead touched by this act of concern, proof of the deep friendship between the two boys. Looking at the beaming Qilong standing at her side, Ling Lan recalled the novels she had read in the past. So it was true that every happy-go-lucky boy would have a cautious and thoughtful bro by his side. Even now, she could see the strong bromance between the two little boys. God was indeed fair and kind, and would protect those who were pure of heart. As her impression of Qilong and Han Jijian rose, Ling Lan's demeanor softened considerably. She greeted Han Jijian amicably. "Hello, I'm Ling Lan. It's nice to meet you." Ling Lan, she is Jijian's younger cousin Han Xuya. She always likes to hang out with us. Don't take her words too seriously. Qilong did not wait for Jijian to respond, interrupting to introduce the plump little girl. Qilong did not notice that his words had irritated the plump little girl so much that she was gnashing her teeth, while Han Jijian threw a somewhat apologetic look at Ling Lan. Looks like he was used to playing the mediator for his best friend and his cousin sister. Ling Lan smiled but did not respond in any way to Qilong's words. This somewhat placated the angry little girl, who felt that Ling Lan at least knew his place, and as such didn't find him as annoying as before. The emotions of girls were truly a fickle thing, regardless of their age. And so the group of children conversed like they were little adults, but they hadn't conversed for long before they heard one of the other children yell out, "The exam is starting." It turned out that the examiner for this test had appeared on the field, and the staff members had begun separating the children into smaller groups. The way they grouped the children was simple. According to their registration number, every 10 numbers became one group. Ling Lan looked at her number, 7253, and then turned to look at the numbers of the children in Qilong's group, and was immediately struck dumb. Damn it, wasn't his too coincidental? Their numbers turned out to be right behind hers, 7254, 7255, 7256. Ignoring Qilong's excitement, Han Jijian's surprise, and Han Xuya's mild discomfort, Ling Lan could do nothing but look up at the sky, the corners of her mouth twitching. Was this the rumored laws of dimension travel? Would anyone fated to connect with her be naturally drawn to gather around her, just like how Qilong had just bulldozed his way into her life? Besides the 4 of them, the 6 other people who belonged in their group had also gathered around them. This was only natural as their group had the most people to begin with, so the others who were scattered had automatically came to join up with the largest party. The newcomers consisted of 5 boys and 1 girl, and one of the boys looked very similar to the girl, so they were probably twins. Although there were hardly any ugly people left at this time, the twins were still extremely good-looking by current standards. They were like porcelain dolls, with clear skins glowing with health. The boy looked dignified and confident, while the girl looked shy and adorable. 2 almost identical faces with 2 distinctly different dispositions. Ling Lan couldn't help but steal a few extra looks. Ling Lan's gaze was perhaps a bit too intent, for the twins seemed to sense it and looked over. The princess-like girl smiled at Ling Lan bashfully, which Ling Lan returned on reflex. When the boy saw this, he glared at Ling Lan, as if warning her not to even think about flirting with his sister. Ling Lan rubbed at her nose, speechless. Fine, so she had been labeled as a little lecher with just one smile. Still, wasn't his little boy's guard a little too high at this age? Wasn't it a little too early to even worry about defending his sister's honor from lechers? Qilong noticed the boy's glares, and glared back fiercely in return as he tried to comfort Ling Lan. Ling Lan, don't mind it. Luo Lang's just like that. His sister is the center of his universe. Looks like Qilong was also familiar with the twins, or else he wouldn't have been able to call out the boy's name so easily. Ling Lan said helplessly, oh, so he has a sister complex. A siscon. Siscon? Qilong paused for a moment, bemused, before bursting out into laughter. Ling Lan, you're just too talented. How did you manage to describe it so perfectly? Siscon. Why didn't I think of that? Qilong's exaggerated reaction surprised Ling Lan. The term siscon had been so popular back in Ling Lan's original world that it had almost become a cliché, so almost everyone knew it. Who knew that it didn't exist in this generation? A thought rose up in Ling Lan's mind. Could it be that, over the years, due to several catastrophes and major disasters, there had been some heavy losses in culture? In that case, the books and other reading materials Little Four had saved might truly be an invaluable pot of gold. Qilong's unusual reaction piqued the interest of the other children, who quickly asked him what was going on. Soon, the term siscon spread like wildfire among the kids, until everyone in the group except the twins had learned about it, and were giggling behind their hands. Though they tried to hide it, their laughter was still obvious enough that Luo Lang, the male twin, couldn't pretend not to see it. His face grew darker and darker, until finally, he could bear it no longer and went right up to Ling Lan to ask, hey, what bad things did you say about us? Ling Lan, face full of angelic innocence, pointed at herself and said, me? Say bad things about you? Why would I do that? She wasn't even laughing with the others. If he was looking for someone to blame, shouldn't he look for Qilong? Without his big mouth, how would the other children have found out and started laughing at Luo Lang? Then why are they laughing at me? Accused Luo Lang angrily. He had seen very clearly that the whole thing had started with Ling Lan. It was Ling Lan's words that caused Qilong and the others to start laughing at them. Ling Lan really didn't know what to do with this accusation. Do you have paranoia syndrome? Paranoia syndrome, PFFT. Stifled laughter once again broke out from behind her. From the moment Luo Lang started talking to Ling Lan, the other children had been paying attention to them, and as expected, they once again heard something really interesting. They discovered that this weak-looking little fellow before them was a great wordsmith, using strange terms they had never heard of before but which fit perfectly with the situation, causing them to laugh uncontrollably. Heavens! He was really too talented. Qilong was laughing the hardest, while even Han Jijian couldn't help but smile like the kid he was, breaking up his usual serious facade. This new bout of laughter made Luo Lang even angrier. He pointed at them all, so angry that he couldn't even speak. Ling Lan heartlessly wondered if he would get angry enough to faint. Chapter 26. The exam begins. It was evident that the physical endurance of the bodies of children in this time period was very high. No matter how angry Luo Lang was, his stance was still tall and steady. The only sign of his building anger was the stormy expression on his face. Seeing Luo Lang's expression, Ling Lan felt a little bad. After all, she was already over 30 years old if you counted the span of both her lives, which meant she could already be considered a weird auntie of sorts. How could she bully a young child like this? A little remorsefully, Ling Lan smiled at Luo Lang and said, I was just joking. Please don't be mad. Ling Lan's smile startled Luo Lang, and her sudden submissive attitude also threw him for a loop. He stood there gaping, nonplussed, and the other children burst out laughing once again. There was no helping it really, for his bewildered look was just too adorable. Even his sister had started giggling softly. She quickly stifled it, however, and lowered her head bashfully, chastising herself mentally for her actions. How could she laugh at her brother who had always watched out for her? Meanwhile, Ling Lan was having a headache over her reflexive smile. It was so troublesome. After she had accidentally revealed her seductive smile once again, Little Four had gone ballistic, and she now had her hands full trying to calm him down. Leaving Ling Lan aside, who was busy with the ballistic Little Four, Luo Lang had been shaken out of his stupor by the others' laughter. When he found that he had once again embarrassed himself, 2 splotches of red flushed over his ivory skin, spreading all the way to the roots of his ears. Then, he channeled his embarrassment into anger and lunged at Ling. Ling Lan's side where Qilong was standing, and pushed him to the ground. Just like that, the two of them began to wrestle as they rolled around on the field. Qilong and Luo Lang were all tangled up with one another. Qilong's friend Han Jijian did not try to help, only pulling Ling Lan and Han Xuai aside to watch as they fought. Meanwhile, Luo Lang's sister had also silently retreated a few steps out of the way, but she continued to watch her brother with worried eyes. With some difficulty, Ling Lan finally managed to calm Little Four, only to return to awareness to find that no one was trying to stop the fight. This baffled Ling Lan. In her past world, if any children started to fight, they would be pulled apart as soon as possible to resolve their problems peacefully. But here, although there were staff members on the field not far from them, they just continued with what they were doing as if nothing was happening. What exactly was going on? Ling Lan felt that her worldview was being challenged by this new world's order. Ling Lan was not someone who could suppress her curiosity. She immediately turned to ask Han Jijian about the situation, earning yet another appraising gaze from him. However, when he saw that Ling Lan really did not understand what was going on, he was rather stunned. This was pretty basic general knowledge that should have been taught by a father. Had Ling Lan's father not told him about it? Even though Han Jijian had his doubts, he still explained to Ling Lan, "This is a habit we've learned since we were little. If we need to resolve a problem with someone, fighting is permitted. However, no matter who wins or loses, the matter is considered closed after the fight." What a strange way of educating their children. Are they not afraid of encouraging violence? Once again Ling Lan was struck by how different the values and principles of her previous education were compared to the survival of the fittest mentality of this world. For example, no matter the origins of a child, whether he was a commoner, an elite, or a noble, the first ambition of all the children here was to join the military. The second ambition was also to join the military, and the third ambition was still to join the military, because strength was might, and military men were the strongest, especially if they managed to become a mecha operator. Only those whose bodies did not meet the requirements would give up on this dream of the military and reluctantly choose another profession. Since young, the education Ling Lan received was geared towards preparing her to become a mecha operator, the strongest of the strong. Everything she learned worked towards this goal, while her mum and Chamberlain Lincoln had never even thought to ask her whether she wanted to be one. Honestly, she was rather apathetic towards the idea of becoming a mecha operator. She was a girl, after all, with very little interest in fighting. She could never have guessed that she would travel to this warring world where the people were militarized, and, even more unexpectedly, that she would have a mecha learning device as a contracted follower. Ling Lan couldn't help but rub her jaw thoughtfully. Could it be that this was fate? Was everything that had happened trying to tell her that she was destined to walk the path of a mecha operator? Qilong and Luo Lang were still fighting neck and neck, although Qilong was actually slightly better in terms of fighting power. Luo Lang had stubborn determination on his side. So, although Luo Lang was slightly disadvantaged, he was still managing to hold his own against Qilong. Ling Lan really wanted to know the outcome of their fight, but when she saw that the staff member in charge of calling out the test groups was getting closer and closer to their numbers, she knew that there was no chance the fight would end in time. With some regret, she called out, "It looks like it'll be our turn soon. Are you guys sure it's alright to continue fighting like this?" The two boys froze at the same time. But Luo Lang reacted faster than Qilong. He shoved Qilong aside and scrambled off the ground, and started to fix his clothing and appearance. Although he could no longer revert to his initial pristine princely presence no matter how hard he tried, his proper upbringing would not allow him to face the examiner in such a disheveled state. Qilong was caught unprepared and was sent tumbling twice over by Luo Lang's push. He quickly clambered up as well and said huffily, "Wait till the test is over. Let's continue our fight then." He was utterly unconcerned with his mussed-up appearance, only swiping at his forehead twice to get rid of some sweat before letting it be. Naturally, Luo Lang refused to back down as well. so the two agreed that they would determine the true winner after the testing ended. Oh, such spirited and competitive young children. Ling Lan felt old, for she could not find any sense in their random fight. By this time, Ling Lan had forgotten that she was actually the culprit who instigated Luo Leng's fight with Qi Long. The testing proceeded rapidly. Qi Long and Luo Leng had barely caught their breath when their group was already being called up by the staff member. The 10 people in Ling Lan's party dared not dawdle and quickly ran over. The 10 of them stood on the racetrack and made their final preparations. Then, an examiner walked over to explain how the testing would go. He asked them to get ready to run from the start line, and explained that they would have to safely arrive at the end line to complete this test. As for scoring, that would depend on how much time they took to complete the course. As Ling Lan got ready, she did not forget to keep an eye on the group of testees before them. This was a habit she had developed after multiple encounters with number 1. Every time number 1 appeared, his every action could be a test, so Ling Lan always had to be on her toes, making sure she caught every little hint in his actions and his words. This strict caution had become a part of her basic instincts. Ling Lan saw the previous group speed off at the examiner's command, and soon she could no longer see their silhouettes. "Do you see it?" Han Jijian leaned close and whispered to her. He had also noticed something strange. "HN, even though the sun is shining brightly in the sky, there is fog on the track." Ling Lan pointed out the problem, which explained why the group before them had disappeared so quickly before their eyes. "Looks like the track here is under some area of effect illusion technology. This test is not as straightforward as it seems." Han Jijian was an intelligent boy who had a deep understanding of advanced technology which other kids, like Ling Lan, may not have. Han Jijian's warning made Ling Lan secretly raise her guard. Very soon, the examiner at the starting line called Ling Lan's group over. Once he had confirmed they were ready, he gave the command, and they were off. Qi Long immediately rushed forward at the head of the group, with Luo Leng close on his heels. It seemed like the two of them were determined to make a competition out of this as well. Ling Lan was third, and Han Jijian was right behind Ling Lan. This strategic child had the same idea as Ling Lan. They were planning to follow behind Qi Long for now as they observed their surroundings. Meanwhile, the other kids were all following at various paces behind Han Jijian. Chapter 27. The true intention of the test. They hadn't run for long when the sunny skies above them turned dark and foreboding. Storm clouds gathered, and thunder rumbled ominously. Right at the front, Qi Long cursed, "Damn our luck. Why did it only start to rain when it's our turn? Hurry up, everyone, or else it'll be even harder to run once it really starts raining, and our results will definitely be affected." After he finished speaking, Qi Long was just about to speed up when Han Jijian called out from behind, "Long, don't speed up, just keep your current pace." Qi Long was confused. He didn't understand why Han Jijian wanted to stop him from speeding up. If it really started to rain, they would have to expend much more energy running through the rain, and the rain would affect their speed as well. Their score in this test was based on how quickly they could arrive at the end point, so shouldn't they try to cover more ground now before it rained? Although Qi Long's mind was full of doubts, one of his strengths was self-awareness. He knew that his blood-sworn brother Han Jijian was much smarter than him, so much smarter that he could only look on in envy. Since his sworn brother had said so, there must be something that he missed. It had been proven enough times in the past that it was never wrong to listen to Han Jijian, so he would put his faith in his brother. And so Qi Long decisively dismissed his worries, and kept running at his original pace. It had to be said that none of the children in Ling Lan's group were particularly competitive in nature, other than Luo Lang. And although Luo Lang was prideful, he was also an intelligent boy, so when he heard Han Jijian's advice to Qi Long, he also decided not to speed up, merely keeping pace behind Qi Long. Among their peers, Han Jijian's intelligence was publicly acknowledged. Even Luo Lang admired Han Jijian for his intelligence, but unfortunately, Han Jijian had befriended that idiot Qi Long before he could get to know him. He was full of regret that he had moved too slowly and felt that it was such a waste. If he had managed to get to Han Jijian first, Qilong would never have had a chance. The other kids also maintained their original pace, keeping close to the group so that they weren't left behind. Anyone who could attend the enrollment tests of the Central Scout Academy of Doha was no idiot. Qilong and Luo Leng's fight had shown them that the two were much stronger than them, so if the two of them weren't afraid of wasting time, why should they be afraid? Han Jijian quickened his steps to catch up to Ling Lan, and jogged by her side. In low tones, he asked, "Ling Lan, what do you think?" Han Jijian's gut just told him that Ling Lan knew something. "Didn't you already notice it yourself?" asked back Ling Lan with a wounded gaze. Damn it, this was truly what was meant by heaven blessed. Han Jijian was only 6 years old, but he was already observant enough to discover something wrong with the situation. She felt pitiful in comparison. She had only noticed the problem thanks to her experience of 2 lifetimes, as well as the intensive training and trials provided the learning mind's pace. This year especially, Ling Lan had been free of any specific training menu or missions, but had been tormented by number 1 via all sorts of methods, causing her to view everything with suspicion now. Looking deeper into everything by at least several layers had become her default reaction. Han Jijian was oblivious of Ling Lan's hurt little soul, continuing in a stern manner, "Chen, it won't matter whether we speed up or not, what will come will come." Perhaps they want to see how we react under pressure. The examiner did not set a clear path for us. I suspect that this test might not have a typical finish line, admitted Ling Lan. Han Jijian's intelligence allowed Ling Lan to speak freely without worry. She could finally throw off her sheepskin of a child. Hanging out with such a talented child meant that her own talents would seem less freakish as well. Ling Lan was so happy she could cry. These 6 years of playing a kid hadn't been easy. Han Jijian turned thoughtful at Ling Lan's words. After a while, he responded, "Possibly. The test had already begun the moment we stepped onto the field." "What do you mean? Is this really a field?" Han Jijian's words jolted Ling Lan into awareness. She thought back to when she first entered the field. That entrance had not at all been like a regular entrance to a field. "Wait and watch," said Ling Lan and Han Jijian in almost perfect unison as their eyes met. Since they had already been caught up in the illusion, all they could do was continue and take things as they came. After that, they had only run a little bit further when it started raining cats and dogs. Ling Lan's party of 10 were quickly soaked to the bone, and the rain obscured their vision while turning the earth beneath their feet into mud. The clothes on their body became heavy with rainwater and clung to their bodies, dragging them down. Under these conditions, having run for several thousand meters, lethargy started settling in. The 2 girls were hit especially hard and had already started to pant. "This is real water, not an illusion," Ling Lan concluded after paying close attention to the signals her body were sending her. It looked like the setting of this test was using a combination of illusions and real props. There was no doubt that in this space they were occupying, there were sprinklers equipped all over the ceiling overhead. Since they already knew that they were walking within a virtual environment within a room, Ling Lan decided to ignore what she could see as she tried to construct an image of the underlying room in her mind. Admittedly, the virtual field presented to everyone had been nicely done. The racetrack of a field was just a large circular circuit, so even if those caught within the illusion ran multiple laps around the track, they would still never suspect that they were merely within an enclosed room. Ling Lan's group ran another few thousand meters. Although it felt like they had run countless circles around the track, not a single examiner came to inform them about how many laps they had left. This seemingly endless test began to cause the hearts of some of the weaker children to waver. In particular, the 2 girls' speed had dropped considerably, and they had fallen behind till they were at the very tail end of the group. The 2 boys who were related to the girls, Luo Leng and Han Jijian, merely turned a blind eye to this, however, continuing to run forward at a steady pace. Seeing this, Ling Lan frowned. Shouldn't they try to help the girls? Han Jijian seemed to notice Ling Lan's hesitation, and quickly explained, "To become a proper soldier, one has to rely on one's own strength. Helping her would be harming her instead. On the battlefield, you can't rely on others to survive." Han Jijian's words made a lot of sense, and Ling Lan was not a saint who would insist on helping. She was just about to ignore the girls when a thought flashed through her mind, causing her to pause in consideration. Was this truly just a test of stamina and speed? If that was the case, the objective could just as easily be achieved on a regular field. Was it really necessary to use such precious illusion technology to create this virtual environment? Furthermore, why split them into so many groups? She recalled the marathons she had seen in her previous life, where tens of thousands of people could run together at the same time. Ling Lan had taken note of the width of the race track. It was about 50 meters wide. Even if not everyone could run at the same time, the track could still easily handle up to several hundreds or thousands of people. Wouldn't doing so speed up the testing process and save time? Perhaps. The test was meant to test something else as well. What was the true intention of the test? Ling Lan knew that the answer to this question was probably the key to this test. If she could figure it out, then she would know how to pass the test. What other hints had there been in the examiner's speech? Sensing Ling Lan's thoughts, Little Four helpfully provided a replay of what the examiner had said. TSK, only revealing what he wanted you to know, while keeping everything else a mystery, as expected of special examiners handpicked from the military forces. Wait a minute. Handpicked from the military forces? Military forces? Realization sparked in Ling Lan's mind. She got it. Since all of their examiners were from the military forces, was this in itself a hint? Moreover, a group of 10 men was precisely the smallest possible military unit in the military forces. Chapter 28. The data of the 10 children. Ling Lan reined in her elation, turning to ask Han Jijian quietly, "What are the requirements to be a qualified soldier?" Han Jijian was very surprised by Ling Lan's random question, but still answered seriously, "Passion and loyalty in service of our beloved Chinese Federation, and to respect, trust, and care for our fellow warriors with a pure heart." Han Jijian recited the oath all soldiers had to swear under the flag of their country when they qualified to become a soldier and put on their uniforms. The oath already included all the qualities required of a soldier. As she listened to Han Jijian's recitation, Ling Lan's eyes grew brighter and brighter. She then continued asking, "And what are scout academies, nurseries for future soldiers?" said Han Jijian without any hesitation or doubt. The smile on Ling Lan's lips became even more noticeable. "Then, we shouldn't lose our pure hearts to respect, trust, and care for our fellow warriors." Han Jijian abruptly came to a realization, and his eyes brightened up. He finally understood what Ling Lan was hinting at. "Qi Long, Luo Lang, go help Han Xuya and Luo Zhao," shouted Han Jijian to the two running at the front. Qi Long almost tripped over his own feet in surprise. Why did they have to help those two girls who were holding them back? "I'll explain once the test is over." Although Han Jijian agreed with Ling Lan's assessment, he didn't want to waste time arguing and so decided not to give Qi Long and Luo Lang an explanation right now. Naturally, Qi Long listened to Han Jijian. He gradually lowered his speed, dropping from first place to the last. Seeing this, Luo Lang hesitated for just a moment before following suit. Remember, one of the two girls who needed help was his own biological sister. In contrast, Qi Long had no direct relation to either girl. Also, while it was true that Luo Lang wanted to beat Qi Long once, he didn't want to win in this way. The prideful Luo Lang wouldn't accept this sort of shameful victory. Undeniably, Qi Long and Luo Lang had the best physical fitness among the 10 children. Ling Lan didn't count due to her being touched by the gods. Even though they each took on the burden of another person, their speed was not reduced by much. In no time at all, the two of them had barreled forward again, once more taking up their positions at the front of the group. In a particular observation room, the officer who just happened to switch his screen to view room 72 let out a surprised shout. Each officer in the room was in charge of monitoring 10 rooms. The officers would switch their individual screens between rooms every 1 minute, going through all 10 rooms in 10-minute intervals, and this officer had just happened to start viewing the feed from room number 72. The officer seated right beside him had been focused on his own screen, but couldn't help looking up in surprise at his colleague's shout. He took a glance at his friend's screen out of curiosity, and when he saw what was happening, he also started to exclaim, "Oh, how interesting!" Their cries attracted the attention of the superintendent, who walked over with a frigid expression on his face. "What's going on? Why did you both break the command to maintain silence?" "Sir, we've noticed some promising recruits," hurriedly reported the two officers, saluting the superintendent. There was no chagrin at all in their voices. Instead, their tone was matter-of-fact. They knew that they were in the right because there was an overriding command in the military. The discovery of any promising recruits was to be reported immediately. And that was precisely what they were doing now. Upon hearing this, the superintendent's expression thawed. He looked at the screen, and with just one glance, his demeanor changed. What he saw on the screen had truly shocked him. The two officers glanced at each other, feeling proud of themselves, but also relieved that the children were still performing brilliantly at this bloody important moment. Sadly, the screen wasn't cooperative. The superintendent had only observed for a few seconds when the feed switched over to that of another room. "Wu, switch the feed back to the previous room," ordered the superintendent. "Yes, sir." Officer Wu was the one who was in charge of monitoring Ling Lan's group. He quickly adjusted the feed so that the screen was fixed on the room Ling Lan's group was in. From the screen, they could see that the two girls, Han Xuya and Luo Zhao, who were originally being dragged around by Qilong and Luo Leng's brutal pace, had now been piggybacked by the two boys. From the looks of it, the two girls had completely depleted their energy and could no longer run on their own. Meanwhile, behind them, the 6 remaining children, including Ling Lan, had started running in a rotation, making sure to assist the two children with the weakest stamina. Of course, they also helped each other, giving each other a push or a supporting shoulder when necessary as they ran, so nobody had been left behind. This current situation was a direct result of Ling Lan and Han Zhijian's decisive actions. If they hadn't reached out first to help the weakest two of their teammates, there would have probably been a few less people in the group by now. Their actions had sparked some realization in the other teammates, whom they didn't know as well. So when those teammates saw that they were growing tired, they had actually stepped up and offered to take over and help. Thus, the current situation came to be as seen on the screen. "Give me the data of these 10 children." Even as he marveled at the sight, the superintendent's brows furrowed. A seed of doubt grew in his heart. This team was altogether too coordinated, causing him to suspect that someone may have abused their authority to manipulate things so that these children had been put into one group on purpose. Soon enough, the data of Ling Lan's group of 10 had been retrieved. Ling Lan, son of Major General Ling Zhao, God-class operator of the Enmecha, Vice Commander of the 7th Division of the Interstellar Forces, inheritor of said Major General's premium military benefits, physical fitness, S, rank, spiritual power, Tier 2, potential, S, rank. Qilong, son of Colonel Qi Yewang, ace pilot of the Mount Mecha, lead pilot of the 3rd Division of the Interstellar Forces, physical fitness, S, rank, spiritual power, Tier 2, potential, S, rank. Luo Lang, son of Colonel Luo Kaifeng, commander of the 3rd Fleet in the 9th Division of the Interstellar Forces, physical fitness, S, rank, spiritual power, Tier 2, potential, S, rank. Han Zhijian, son of Colonel Han Rong, Deputy Director of the Federal Central Military Intelligence Agency, physical fitness, A+, rank, spiritual power, Tier 3, potential, S, rank. Luo Zhao, daughter of Colonel Luo Kaifeng, commander of the 3rd Fleet in the 9th Division of the Interstellar Forces, physical fitness, B, rank, spiritual power, Tier 2, potential, A, rank. Han Xuya, daughter of Major Han Yashao, acting head of the Federal Logistics Base on the planet of Qian, physical fitness, B, rank, spiritual power, Tier 2, potential, A, rank. Luo Xian, commoner, nephew of Captain Luo Zhigang, commander of the 3rd Company of the Mecha Protective Task Force for Mecha Operators of the 13th Division of the Interstellar Forces, inheritor of said captain's premium military benefits. Physical fitness, A. Rank. Spiritual power, Tier 1. Potential, A. Rank. Yuan Yun, descendant of the Yuan family of the planet of Zong Crossing. Physical fitness, A. Rank. Spiritual power, Tier 1. Potential, A. Rank. Li Jingong, descendant of the Li family of the planet of Doha. Physical fitness, B. Rank. Spiritual power, Tier 1. Potential, B+. Rank. He Kaiang, commoner, adopted son of Captain He Shoji, Deputy Captain of the 9th Fleet Assault Forces of the 17th Division of the Interstellar Forces, inheritor of said captain's premium military benefits. Physical fitness, B. Rank. Spiritual power, Tier 1. Potential, B+. Rank. Taking in this data, the superintendent could clearly see that all the children came from different star systems, and had backgrounds from all walks of life, though over half came from traditional military families. Most importantly, however, even the weakest potential among the children was at B+ rank. Even if that ranking might not qualify for the special classes, it was more than enough to ensure a spot in the regular classes. The superintendent looked once more at the first line. Ling Lan's data, in particular, made a surge of emotion rise up within him. The God-class operator of the Mecha Major General Ling Zhao. That man was the role model of countless soldiers. It was such a shame he had died in the death tunnel of a meteor field 7 years ago. He could still remember what a shock it was when the news had first been received. The whole Federation had been shaken to its core, and all the military men had been greatly saddened by the tragedy. For context, it should be noted that there were only 12 God-class Mecha operators throughout the entire Federation. Each God-class operator was considered a national treasure, and was the representation of a country's might, acting as a deterrent to foreign enemies. And Major General Ling Zhao, in particular, had been the only operator to have ascended to God-class within the past 10 years, and he had also been the youngest Mecha operator. Back then, everyone had been optimistic, anticipating that Major General Ling Zhao would be able to become the strongest God-class operator among the 12, with youth as his greatest advantage. Sadly, the tree of his talent grew too high above the canopy. It was toppled by the wind long before he could truly spread out his branches. Later on, the Federation's investigation had uncovered that the magnetic turbulence within the death tunnel was most likely a sinister plot hatched by an enemy nation, specifically targeting Major General Ling Zhao. Unfortunately, the Federal Intelligence Agency hadn't discovered this in time, and the painful price of their oversight was twofold. Not only had the nation lost the potentially strongest God-class mecha operator of the future, but the two countries had also become bitter enemies, whereby the war between them would not stop till one side was annihilated. The death of a God-class mecha operator would never be forgiven by the soldiers of the Federation. Chapter 29, The Final Lap. The superintendent suppressed his surging emotions, putting his full focus on the performance of the 10 children on the screen. Finally, he smiled with satisfaction and said, "End their test and let them out." The officer in charge of monitoring Ling Lan's group wavered, and asked, "Then how shall we score them?" The superintendent glared. "Do you need me to teach you something so simple? How much time did they take to complete the course, and how is their condition now?" The officer's eyes brightened. "Understood, sir." Meanwhile, on Ling Lan's end, the group of 10 had been holding out for another few rounds. By now, even the indomitable Qilong and Luoling were starting to tire. Running with another person on your back was worlds apart from running on your own. After just a few rounds, they had begun to feel the doubled strain on their bodies. Initially, they had thought that they would be able to persist for another 10 to 20 rounds, but now they weren't so sure about that. Among the 10 children, Ling Lan was definitely the one in the best condition, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that she was never tired, because from the moment they had started running, Ling Lan had been circulating her qi. Ever since she had tasted its fruits in the strength test, Ling Lan had harbored suspicions that the qi exercises still had secrets for her to uncover. So, she decided to apply it once again during the running test. Clearly, her decision was a wise one. After running for so long, she was still brimming with energy, and her vital stats remained at the same levels as when she was at rest. These numbers were all supplied by Little Four. While Linglan was marveling at her discovery, Little Four had shuffled over. To put it nicely, he wanted to help Linglan research the Qi exercises and fulfill his role as a contracted assistant. But in truth, Little Four was just bored because he had no access to the internet here. Still, with Little Four's help, Linglan very quickly understood the secrets of the Qi exercises. Apparently, circulating Qi could replenish the body's energy as it was being expended, as well as repair any damage affecting the body's functions, allowing the body to maintain peak condition over long periods of time. Of course, Little Four also noted that the current situation, where her body was maintaining a stasis between expenditure and recovery, was only possible because Linglan was not using much energy right now. If Linglan were to carry someone and run, like Qilong or Luo Lang, full equilibrium would probably be impossible. Some energy would still be expended. That said, Little Four encouraged Linglan by adding that the amount of energy recovered by the Qi exercises would increase the more she trained and circulated her Qi, to the point that eventually, she may possibly never have to worry about her energy levels ever again. Of course, this was only a possibility after several decades of training. But Little Four decided that Linglan didn't really need to know that. Linglan, who was still as sprightly as ever, looked at the sweat streaming from Qilong and Luo Lang's foreheads as their steps started to slow. She could tell that their stamina was starting to fail, and that they might soon be unable to go on. Linglan was unsure whether she should offer to take over and help them. She wanted to, but she was also afraid that she would stand out too much by doing that. If only there was a way for her to help without being noticed. Currently, under Little Four's regulation, Linglan's outward condition appeared to be similar to that of Han Jijian's. Both of them were panting hard, and the backs of their shirts were drenched with sweat. After all, she had been helping the weakest boy in their group all this time. Although she wasn't piggybacking the boy like Qilong, carrying part of another's weight was still naturally more tiring than running solo. A devil and an angel were fighting in Linglan's mind as she pondered this dilemma. But before one of them could overpower the other, the outside world had already made Linglan's decision for her. Luo Lang cheered as he pointed towards one side. "I see a sign. One more lap left." Luo Lang's words were like a shot of adrenaline to the heart. Some of the children who were on the brink of giving up rallied themselves for a final push. Linglan looked towards where Luo Lang was pointing at, and saw an examiner lifting a display screen, which only had a number 1 written on it in Arabic numerals. This clearly indicated that they only had one more lap left to go. Seeing this, Han Jijian encouraged the group onwards. "Just one more lap left. We need to hold on no matter what. Make sure no one is left behind." "Okay." All the other 9 members of the group shouted in response, Linglan included. They would get through this final round no matter what. Han Xuya suddenly inhaled sharply, and yelled, "Qilong, put me down." "What's wrong?" asked Qilong in surprise. "The last round." "I can do it." It was impossible for Han Xuya not to have noticed Qilong's fatigue, and she didn't want Qilong's results to be affected because of her. Qilong was meant for the Special A class. For this final round, she would run on her own, even if she fainted before she could finish. She didn't want to burden Qilong any longer. On the other side, Luo Zhao was also trying to convince Luo Lang to put her down for mostly the same reason. She didn't want her brother's results to be dragged down because of her. The 2 girls wanted Qilong and Luo Lang to run at full speed for this final lap so that they could battle it out for the best time. Han Jijian stepped in to dissuade them. "It's already the final lap. If we don't all make it to the end, then what we've been doing so far will all be for nothing. Besides, you all should know what true soldiers do. They never leave a comrade behind." Han Jijian's words were like a ray of light. Several of the quick-witted children had immediately figured out what he was saying. Han Xuya and Luo Zhao, who had initially still wanted to protest, also changed their minds at Han Jijian's words. Instead, Han Xuya urged. Qilong, pull me quickly. Let's move faster. Since they had already decided to finish together, then they couldn't afford to waste even one more second. And so, the strong pulled the weak in Linglan's group, and just like that, they supported each other as they hastened towards the finish line. At this time, Linglan took charge of pulling along the weakest two boys, leaving Han Jijian free to run on his own. Han Jijian threw a grateful glance in her direction. Linglan's help was much appreciated. His stamina was almost completely gone. If he still had to pull along another person, he was uncertain if he could actually finish this final lap. Outside the virtual environment testing room was an open-air cafe where more than a few of the examiners were seated, drinking tea and chatting with one another. This test was a long one which would last for at least 3 to 4 hours. Naturally, the examiners would not just sit outside the testing room and wait the whole time. Most of them would typically order a cup of tea or coffee here to pass the time, and perhaps find a few familiar friends to chat with. Similarly, the on-site examiner responsible for room 72 was talking to a few close friends. He was just getting comfortable when the communication device on his wrist started beeping. He tapped the accept button on the device, and with a silver flash, a holographic screen appeared before him. Simultaneously, the image of the officer in charge of monitoring room 72 appeared on the screen. Notice: the testees in room 72 are about to complete the test. Please make the necessary preparations. The examiner was bewildered. Complete the test? In less than 2 hours? Really? He really could not be blamed for his disbelief, for there had never been a record of this test being completed in less than 2 hours in all the history of the Scout Academy tests. The only exceptions were the children who had to be removed early from the room when they faded out of exhaustion. However, there was no such notification from his communication device, which was tracking the status of the 10 children he was responsible for. None of the dots representing the 10 children were red, which indicated unconsciousness, or even yellow, which meant their body had given out on them. All the dots were still green, indicating that they were all still conscious and that their bodies were still capable of going on. The invigilator of room 72 observed the incredulous face of the on-site examiner, and couldn't help but laugh. He kindly reminded him, "You should hurry, otherwise you won't make it in time. Also, the kids in that group are great kids. You won't be disappointed." Without giving the examiner any chance to ask any further questions, the invigilator of room 72 ended the video call. He grinned to himself as he recalled the shocked face of the examiner. Coming here to monitor these kids had not been so boring after all. The examiner stared blankly at the dark screen before him, speechless. This blasted invigilator, couldn't he have explained more clearly? The rest of the on-site examiners had also heard their conversation, all of whom were now looking at him in shock. Of course, there were also those who were burning with curiosity, and were just waiting to find out more so they could gossip. "I've got it. Let me find out what's going on, then I'll come back and tell you guys. I need to go work now." Pensively, the examiner stood up, calmly grabbing his military cap from the table and putting it on before slowly ambling over to room 72. Damn it. Those children in there had better not disappoint him. The examiner tried to suppress his anticipation. His previous calm had actually been completely faked. Chapter 30, I order you all to attack me. The cafe was connected by just one tunnel to a pearly white, awe-inspiring building of epic proportions right across from it. Its walls, which stretched on endlessly, appeared to be seamless, but they actually contained countless electronic doors hidden from the naked eye. The main door to this virtual reality construct was accessible from this tunnel, and it was open to the professional soldiers of the Federation for virtual simulation training and sparring. On the other hand, the entrance Linglan and the other children had entered from was actually the back door of this virtual reality construct. It was connected to the Scout Academy and appeared to be just a regular field from the outside. This was also why Linglan had been so easily fooled. Who'd have thought that a Scout Academy would have access to such advanced virtual technology? From this, one could see how much importance the Federation placed on cultivating talent among the young. Of course, The convenient access bestowed upon the Scout Academy was not purely for testing purposes. In the future, the assistance of virtual technology would be invaluable in elevating all the stats of the children. The examiner walked along the pearly white wall for a distance. Frankly speaking, without using the signal he had preset with his communication device, the examiner himself wouldn't have a clue where room 72 was. Once these electronic doors merged into this endless wall, they could no longer be seen from the surface, as if they had become one with the wall. The examiner was walking down yet another length of the wall when suddenly, the communication device on his wrist vibrated. He immediately stopped, a smile appearing on his face. It looked like he had found the room. Almost randomly, he brushed his fingers over the section of wall right in front of where he stood, though it was really with focused intent. Soon enough, his fingertips told him that he had found the correct spot, and he pressed down lightly 3 times. The wall reacted rapidly, the spot where the examiner had pressed lit up, and a palm-sized screen emerged from the wall. The screen displayed a password page, with an input keyboard consisting only of the 10 Arabic numerals, 0 to 9. The examiner smiled as his fingers flew across the keyboard. His speed was astounding. His fingers moved so quickly that they appeared to leave blurry trails in the air. It was impossible for any observer to see which numbers he was pressing. And then there was a loud click, like the sound of a sealed door unlocking. Within the blink of an eye, a doorway had appeared to the left of the examiner. The examiner strode in, and the door closed behind him, silently blending into the pearly white wall once again. The moment the examiner entered room 72, a wide virtual racetrack came into view. Behind him, neither the door nor the wall could be seen anymore, only a racetrack, which extended as far as the eye could see, remained. The illusion was so realistic that it was hard to believe that a door and a wall had existed right there just moments ago. The examiner did not wait for long before 10 figures appeared on the distant horizon. Some were running while some were pulled along. Some were dragging others down while some supported others. But still they staggered forward at a run. No, walk would be more accurate. It looked like the 10 children were at the end of their ropes. In the past tests, the children would usually appear one at a time, unlike this group that still appeared organized and managed to arrive at the finish line without losing a single member. The examiner found himself slightly impressed. Perhaps this was what the monitoring officer had been trying to tell him. They were truly great kids. When the children saw him, they suddenly perked up and then, as if they had been injected with stimulants, they rapidly stormed towards the examiner like ferocious tigers. The examiner smiled. The fact that the promise of victory could prompt such a reaction from these kids was a good sign. Truly, they had potential. The examiner was very pleased, and his impression of Linglan's group improved yet again. I see the examiner. The exhausted Qilong caught sight of the examiner when he lifted his head, and the welcome sight made him call out in exhilaration. Hearing his call, the other 9 children rallied, eyes turning bloodshot, their appearances just like rabid wolves. Ah woo! Eerily in sync, the 10 children let out a ravenous howl and then, just as if they had seen a gourmet dish cross over into their territory, they abruptly exploded with energy, rushing toward the examiner standing in the distance. They barreled over the finish line but didn't slow down at all. Instead, they actually sped up as they pounced on the waiting examiner. The charge of the 10 children was so aggressive that the examiner was taken aback. But who did they think he was? The examiner was a professional soldier who had lived through large-scale galactic battles. He regained his composure within a split second. These little rascals, facing this sudden attack, the on-site examiner was rather speechless. With a stony expression, without even moving a single step, he slightly twisted his body to the side. And just like that, he completely evaded the children's desperate final attack. Darn it! We missed. Qilong stumbled face first into the ground and punched the ground in frustration. Luo Lang, who was not far away from Qilong, also slumped to the ground with a face full of dissatisfaction. The thing was, just as they were about to give up, Qilong had suggested a plot that had boosted their waning energy. What Qilong said was that they must take revenge upon the examiner by turning him into a human cushion. That's right. They would push him to the ground and stack themselves on top of him. This would show the examiners that they were not to be easily bullied. Alright, so this plot had fanned the festering hatred of the 10 children to the max, actually managing to draw out unknown wells of energy from within them, which had allowed them to continue running all the way till the end. Hatred truly was a formidable force. As for Ling Lan, she hadn't cooperated mainly out of hatred. Instead, her mind had drifted to strange places, just thinking about a group of bratty kids pushing down a mature and handsome examiner. Wasn't this just like some trashy group student-teacher romance? Wasn't it? Wasn't it? Fine, so Ling Lan was a corrupted soul. It was all the fault of her previous life, during which she had read all sorts of lowbrow novels without shame. The examiner stood watching them with his arms folded before him. With a cold smile, he said, Oh, I see you still have energy left. Not bad. The frigid look on his face was like ice, but he was actually ecstatic inside. Hell, this group was just too much like those batches of new soldiers he trained. They had spirit, they had guts, and they could think for themselves, and yet they were only 6 years old. How extraordinary. The examiner felt the itch to just grab these 10 children straight into his boot camp for special training. They were sure to become great soldiers someday. Qilong raised his arms in surrender. Sir, we are fully beat. The examiner scoffed. If you all want to pass, get up. Damn it, still being able to speak in such a loud voice when you're out of energy? Who do you think you're trying to fool? Qilong scat, but pried himself off the ground anyway. Everyone had worked so hard to complete this test. If they failed simply because they couldn't stand up at the end, how shameful would that be? Qilong was deeply influenced by his father, who firmly believed that man should face death standing up. Qilong was the first to stand up, and Luolang was the second. Even though Luolang's hands and legs were cramping due to exhaustion, he still couldn't bear losing to Qilong. Seeing Qilong stand, he pushed his body to stand out of sheer unwillingness to lose. Ling Lan was next, followed by Han Shijian, Luo Xian, Li Jingong, and He Kaiang. They each stood up one by one, in sequence, until the final two, the girls Han Xuya and Luo Zhao, were standing as well. Although they stumbled and fell several times in the process, gracelessly, they all still managed to stand up straight in the end. In their eyes, all one could see was the stubborn persistence for success. The examiner was pleased. Not bad. You lot are certainly spirited. Now, I order you all to attack me. All the children were stunned by this sudden turn of events. Han Jijian reacted the fastest. The CPU of his brain spun at high speeds, analyzing the intent behind the examiner's words. His expression was serious and solemn as he asked, Why,